This guy was a complete nobody on the battlefield, a talentless loser. His mana core was weak, so he couldn't evolve his spear or use magic. He died as a centurion in a punishment unit, fighting in a war that humanity ultimately lost. But that was about to change, because Damien woke up 17 years in the past. He still possessed the spear mastery that had taken him a lifetime to achieve, and now he had a body capable of using mana. The moment he woke up, some men wanted him to sign a document that would allow his uncle to manage the insurance money left behind by his deceased parents. With a friendly smile on his face, his uncle urged him to sign it. After all, he claimed he would take care of everything until the boy became an adult. But his uncle had no idea who he was dealing with. Damien tore up the contract and demanded that the insurance money be placed under his own name and deposited into his own account. Back then, in this timeline, he was just a 13-year-old boy who had been tricked by his uncle. After the money was stolen, he survived by taking odd jobs in the back alleys. He was an abandoned orphan who eventually became a slave. Furious, his uncle grabbed him by the shirt and demanded to know how he dared to disobey. Damien simply smiled. The body was that of a child, but the person inside was a battle-hardened war veteran. The very next second, he landed a punch right on the fat uncle's face. He was grateful that this man was still the same worthless scumbag. Terrified, the blonde man quickly took the documents so he could add the new terms. That night, Damien was still amazed that he had returned to the past. He examined his mana core, because in his previous life it had been destroyed, but in this life, it was still intact, meaning he could finally master mana. As he recalled his time in the army, Damien suddenly felt something strange. He immediately got up and drew a dagger. The moment the door opened, he lunged forward and slashed the hooded intruder's leg. While one of them writhed on the floor in pain, the other tried his luck. But Damien dodged the attack and stabbed him through the leg, demanding to know who had sent those bastards after him. Lying on the floor in pools of blood, the hooded intruders groan in pain, unable to stand up. Then, a hand violently grabs one of the men by his collar. Pressing a knife against his neck, the boy demands to know if Pucker was the one who sent him. Met with silence, the kid stabs the intruder while repeating the question forcefully. Staring at the boy, the man realizes how terrifying that behavior was for a child. Then, the kid whispers Mukman's name, shocking the newcomer that he already knows who he is. Realizing Mukman is there, the boy deduces the situation is even more serious. Right after, the kid strikes the fallen intruder again to prevent any reaction. With a smirk on his face, the boy pieces together the conspiracy. After all, the origin of this whole story traced back 17 years ago in the city streets. Back then, the little boy begged to be let go as he was dragged forcibly through the alleys. During his escape attempt, the kid ended up brutally slammed to the ground. Because of that, the boy realized the kidnapping was part of a plan masterminded by Pucker. Back in the present, the blade plunges into his opponent once more. Finally, the boy stands firm in the room before his defeated enemies. With the knife in hand, the kid wonders if that man had betrayed him. In front of him, Mukman watches the scene with a mocking smirk. Then, the man rushes forward at top speed, swinging his sword at the kid. Seeing the blow coming, the boy effortlessly dodges by sliding across the floor. His eyes widening, Mukman is stunned to see his attack completely missed. Looking back calmly, the boy asks if the man had always been this weak. As he maneuvers in combat, the kid explains that he possesses a special skill. Attacking without hesitation, the opponent hurls insults while the boy reveals he learned to read enemy movements after surviving countless battles. The kid adds that he can spot the direction of their gaze and footsteps at the moment of the attack. On top of that, the boy tracks the rotation of his opponent's waist and shoulder movements. Dodging another strike, the kid claims he can see precisely where the enemy intends to strike. Faced with the perfect dodge, Mukman screams at the boy. As he throws another blow, the man calls his opponent a rat, unaware that his action was far too predictable for the kid. Seizing the opening, the boy slashes Mukman's hand with his blade. From the impact of the strike, the man's sword drops to the ground as he lets out a groan of pain. Right after, the kid completely disarms his opponent, sending the sword flying under the man's incredulous gaze. Furious at the situation, Mukman curses at the kid while trying to hold back the pain. Lacking the strength to stay on his feet, the intruder collapses to his knees, coughing heavily. Clutching his injured arm, he can't believe a simple child was capable of doing this. In a swift motion, the boy strikes Mukman again, making the man groan once more. Staring at the figure before him, the intruder is terrified to confirm his opponent is only 13 years old. Calmly, the kid asks if the man was curious to know how he managed to block the attack. Then, the boy explains he could predict every strike just by watching the enemy's arm movements. Faced with that surreal explanation, Mukman mutters that it didn't make any sense at all. Keeping the blade firm against his opponent, the kid says he can believe whatever he wants because that was the truth. Feeling the blade on his skin, Mookman retorts, asking if he thought he was the only one, and warns him about the risk of others finding out. Pressing the knife against his throat, the kid fires back that the man will die right here, so he won't be spreading any rumors. Then, the boy says the guy is smart enough to know what to do, and asks again if Pucker sent him. Faced with the direct question, Mookman stays silent, keeping his head down without a word. Noticing the hesitation, the kid threatens that he better answer if he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life walking with a limp. Terrified by the boy's attitude, the man wonders how someone just 13 years old could have eyes like that. In silence, the kid keeps glaring at his opponent without showing an ounce of mercy. Giving in to the pressure, Mookman confesses Pucker ordered them to bring him back barely alive, making the boy reply that was all he needed to know. Surprised by his words, the man barely has time to react before the blade reaches his neck. Clasping his hands over the wound instantly, the intruder gags, unable to stop the bleeding. As the guy collapses lifeless to the floor, the boy comments that, even though he was leaving, he needed to settle this loose end. The kid adds that he prefers to clean up his own mess before walking away. Continuing to walk, the boy ponders that one of the lessons from his previous life was to avoid making enemies. Reaching the bedroom door, the kid adds one exception to that logic. Leaving the bodies behind, the boy concludes that if an enemy emerges, they must be utterly destroyed. Outside, the night swallows the quiet mansion surrounded by lush greenery. In another room, a hooded figure checks his watch and comments that the job should have been finished by now. Overhearing the concern about the boy being on his way, the mercenary assures Pucker he will drag the kid back as soon as they finish. Then the hooded man scoffs, saying the client must be furious to have turned to him over a mere child. Slamming his fist on the table in rage, Pucker barks that his current situation is all that brat's fault. Sitting at the table, Pucker asks for a moment, while the mercenary tells him to wait and warns him not to even think about cutting his pay for the delay. Suddenly, knocks on the door echo through the room, drawing the pair's attention. Noticing someone approaching, the hooded man announces their visitor has arrived, while Pucker regrets that he can't finish the boy on the spot because of the contract. Full of spite, Pucker reinforces that as soon as he settles the insurance matter, the kid is dead. Suspicious of the silence in the hallway, the mercenary questions why his men are taking so long. The next second, the room door bursts open as the visitor arrives. Seeing the figure step inside, the hooded man realizes in shock that his subordinates have failed. Walking in while gripping his spear, the boy confirms his name is Demian and instantly calls his opponent a lapdog. Outraged by the nerve, the warrior hears the kid claim he is nothing more than a lapdog serving that pig. Bursting into laughter at the insult, the man turns to Pucker, ready to change the terms of their deal. Then the mercenary demands triple his commission fee, leaving Pucker completely dumbfounded by the demand. Adjusting his grip on his sword, the warrior justifies the high price, claiming they suffered severe losses. Looking closely at his rival's weapon, the opponent points to the blood dripping from the tip of the spear. Facing Demian's menacing posture, the man concludes that a completely unexpected variable has entered his plan. Desperate over the extortionate fee, Pucker yells that paying triple the original price is ridiculous. Leaving no room for negotiation, the mercenary warns that if he doesn't accept, the deal is off, making the man beg him to wait. Glancing sideways at the scene, the guy notices the boy's firm stance, ready for battle. Faced with Demian's intimidating presence, the client lets out a terrified scream as he senses the danger radiating from the kid. Terrified of being left alone, Pucker gives in and shouts that he'll pay triple, admitting he'll die if the mercenary leaves. Satisfied with the answer, the warrior accepts the deal on the spot and adjusts his grip on his sword. Observing his young rival, the hooded man claims he holds no grudge over the death of his subordinates as it was strictly business. Staring down his opponent firmly, Demian fires back that he definitely holds a grudge for everything they've done. The young man remembers spending half of his past life living in garbage and dark alleys while running from pursuers. The boy recalls that back then, he even had his mana circuit completely destroyed because of the relentless hunt. Gripping his spear tightly, Demian declares he will never let it slide, and tells his rival to just die without asking questions. Enraged by the provocation, the warrior charges with his sword, cursing the boy for his sheer insolence. In a swift move, the kid strikes low, targeting the opponent's lower body. Surprised by the blade's path, the man instantly realizes the attack is aiming for his legs. Seeing his adversary's combat stance, the mercenary concludes that Demian is far from a normal child. Immediately after, the metallic clash of weapons echoing through the room rings out with incredible force. Moving with impressive agility, the boy dodges his opponent's strikes while looking for an opening. Seeing this, the warrior calculates that he'll strike the moment his rival tries to protect his face. With that strategy in mind, the man aims a high blow toward Demian's head. At the exact same time, the mercenary plans to slash the boy's thigh using a second blade in his attack. Keeping up his relentless assault, the man lunges forward to land his surprise strike. Noticing the weapon approaching fast, Demian tracks its every move with extreme focus. Confident in his maneuver, the warrior shouts that this is his real attack, but in the next second, the man realizes in confusion that his blade hit nothing but thin air. Dodging with ease, Demian notes that he already knew the knife in his right hand was the real threat. With a precise counterattack, the boy strikes his rival's back with his spear, making his opponent groan in pain. Effortlessly, Demian calmly reiterates that he had already predicted every step of the fight. Gnashes his teeth in fury, the warrior curses in frustration at the boy for outsmarting him. Consumed by rage, the man charges again, screaming and swearing he'll kill him no matter what. Witnessing that overwhelming scene, Pucker trembles in terror, realizing the situation has spiraled completely out of control. Unable to stay on his feet, the mercenary falls to his knees, coughing up blood from the impact of the blow. Staring down at his fallen opponent, Demian notes that while this guy was stronger than Mukman, he was still nothing more than a simple alleyway bully. With the enemy finally defeated, an absolute silence falls over the room. On his knees and stuttering in terror, Pucker begs the boy to listen to him before doing anything. Paying no attention to his pleas, Demian simply keeps advancing toward him with firm steps. Panicking completely, Pucker screams in desperation, demanding that the boy stay away. That very night, a terrified scream echoes loudly from inside the isolated mansion. Later, in a quiet setting, the clerk informs Demian that he'll be depositing 6 platinum and 650 gold coins. Checking the documents, the boy reflects that the first thing he did after settling everything was to cash in his insurance policy. As the transaction wraps up, Demian thanks him for the service, while the clerk returns the thanks for his trust. Before the young man leaves, the clerk calls his attention and shyly asks where he plans to go now. Looking outside, the clerk comments that the young man's carriage looks ready for a long journey. Calmly, Demian replies that he plans to enlist in the army, catching the clerk completely off guard. As the carriage moves down the road, the young man explains that there are a few people he needs to meet again. Gazing out the window along the way, Demian takes in the scenery as he travels toward his next destination. With that, the young man reflects that his comrades are in the army, and that it's the only place he truly belongs. The boy considers that in 5 years, the situation will change drastically, and most young men will end up drafted into the war. With that in mind, Demian predicts that an era of inevitable conflict is approaching fast. Then, the young man remembers that this time he managed to prevent his mana circuit from being damaged in the back alleys. With that thought, the boy concludes that it's better to enlist voluntarily than to wait until he turns 25. Planning every step, Demian decides to go to the capital to train for a week before registering at the training center. Looking out the window, the boy promises that this time he won't be swept away by the circumstances of that era. Firm in his resolve, the young man declares that instead, he will master his own destiny. A week later, Demian finally arrives at the Grand Military Training Center. Right upon his arrival, a powerful strike hits a training target with great force in the courtyard. Witnessing the scene, the men around him ask in surprise who that kid is and where he learned that. Finishing the move, Demian steps back as he pulls his spear back under their impressed gazes. Looking at his own hand, the boy thinks about wrapping it, noticing his current body isn't calloused yet. He then compares his current skin to the calloused texture he had in his previous life. Just then, the instructor approaches with a cough and asks if he's a training candidate, receiving an immediate confirmation from Demian. Impressed, the instructor praises the boy's spear handling and asks where he learned that technique. In reality, it's the most common spear technique used by the kingdom's soldiers, despite having a flashy name. Hearing the question, Demian replies that his late father taught him, prompting the man to apologize immediately for asking. Reassuring the man, the boy explains that his father's pride in the army inspired him to enlist, securing his approval on the spot. Confused by the comment, the young man asks him to repeat it, but the instructor quickly brushes it off and tells him to forget it. Changing the subject, the man clears his throat and asks for the boy's name. Standing at attention, Demian replies by giving his name. Hearing the answer, the instructor nods and wishes the new recruit good luck. Thanking him for his kindness, the boy watches the man walk away toward the stairs. Right after, the young man notices in surprise that an energy is starting to manifest around his body. Pressing his waist area, the boy immediately recognizes that feeling welling up inside him. Wrapped in this force, Demian realizes that he can finally use mana. This is Delft's mana cultivation method, created 15 years in the future by a genius and famous for its extreme efficiency. Looking back, the boy remembers that his mana circuit was destroyed, which is why he desperately memorized the method. Back then, his comrades mocked him, asking why he was memorizing it if he couldn't even use mana. Annoyed by the mocking, Demian complained fiercely while the soldiers walked away laughing. Back in the present, he concludes that his past effort wasn't in vain. and now he just needs to pass the exam. Walking through the area, the young man looks around carefully while thinking about his next steps. At that moment, Demian remembers that an old acquaintance came from this exact third training center. With that memory in mind, he wonders what that guy must look like right now. Soon after, the recruits gather in the vast training yard to begin the evaluations. With that, the first stage of the exam begins, requiring candidates to lift a heavy stone from the ground. Getting ready to lift the rock, Demian considers that lifting over 60 pounds overhead quickly weeds out the unprepared rookies. Effortlessly, the boy lifts the weight above his head and hears his approval confirmed. Satisfied with the result, Demian reflects that the test was nothing for someone who has already reached the first level of mana. With the first test over, the participants line up in order to await the next challenge. In front of everyone, the instructor loudly announces that the second test is about to begin. Next, the official proclaims that the next stage will be a long-distance run. Continuing his explanation, the instructor warns that the time limit is an hour and a half, adding that minor bumping is allowed. Hearing that attacking competitors is forbidden, Demian deduces that because of this rule, there will be disguised instructors among them. Furthermore, the man warns that leaving the designated course will result in immediate disqualification. Facing all these requirements, the boy smirks subtly, thinking that this test will be quite fun. Right after, the marked route stretches across the terrain, while the participants await the signal. While preparing by stretching his arms, the young man is surprised by another candidate commenting that they are both in the same group. Looking puzzled, Demian asks if he was talking to him, and the newcomer confirms he's been watching his moves. Not understanding the reason for so much attention, the boy notices that the face looks very familiar. Stepping even closer, the other guy asks if he really doesn't know who he is. Leaning in close to his ear, the young man whispers that he knows Demian can use mana. Hearing that, the boy reflects that there's no law forbidding commoners from using mana, though it usually requires noble backing or a unique background. Starting to suspect the guy's true identity, Demian decides to ask for his name. With a smile on his face, the boy reveals his name is Apple, leaving Demian surprised to learn that he started in a place like this. With that revelation, he remembers that Apple will become a general and a count by 30, a living legend among warriors. Recalling that this guy was the most admired commoner of all, Demian listens as Apple says he was bored from a lack of peers his age and proposes they both give it their all. Accepting the proposal with a handshake, the young man agrees, thinking there's no reason not to get along since the guy seems friendly. At that moment, the instructor uses a megaphone to order all participants to get ready for the start of the race. As soon as the signal is given, the candidates dash down the courtyard track at top speed. Right after, the most eager runners take the lead, charging ahead in a pack along the course. Seeing the fast pace set by the leaders, the confused rookies wonder if they plan to burn through all their energy right at the start. Running alongside his companion, Demian mentions that the men up front form what's known as the Wall of Lamentations, and that breaking past them is the real test. Hearing the explanation, Apple suggests they just fall behind and pass everyone at the end, leading the boy to admit it's a solid strategy. But right after, Demian says that's simply not his style, and blasts ahead of everyone at full speed. Catching his companion completely off guard, Apple reacts in shock, unable to understand the boy's sudden burst of speed. Further ahead, the leader of a group instructs his men to keep a slow pace, saying only the final 10 minutes truly matter. While running at his own pace, one of the veterans looks back in surprise as he hears fast footsteps closing in. Seeing Demian charging like lightning straight toward them, the man yells, unable to believe the rookie's nerve. Watching him approach, another veteran notes that they've got a hothead this year and tells his buddy to just teach him a lesson without actually hurting him. With a confident smirk, the man replies that the kid might get hurt himself bumping into his solid shoulders, but promises he'll try to go easy on him. Asking for room, Demian taps his opponent's shoulder as he takes the lead. Shocked by his audacity, the veterans can barely comprehend how the boy moved past them so fast. In just a few seconds, Demian pulls far ahead on the course, leaving a cloud of dust behind. Seeing him burst ahead, the group leader orders his men to stop the kid immediately, receiving quick confirmation from his crew. As he pushes forward, he considers that while the instructors might be stronger than the candidates, they aren't invincible. Continuing his run, Demian reflects that at the end of the day, they're still just courtyard instructors. Seeing his rival's excitement, Apple bursts out laughing while the other recruits wonder what on earth is wrong with that guy. Hyped up by the scene, he smiles confidently and declares he won't be left behind in the test either. In the next instant, Apple takes off at top speed down the track, hot on the leader's heels. Blown away by the sudden sprint, the participants question if that's even allowed and decide to pick up the pace together. Watching the dust rise in the distance, the veterans are startled by the massive crowd charging right behind them. Right after, shouts echo across the field as the chaotic stampede creates complete mayhem on the track. From above, one of the instructors remarks that the vibe in the second courtyard seems different today, guessing a crazy recruit must have shown up. Facing the chaos, the man asks if they should call in reinforcements, but is ordered to leave everything as it is. Stepping into view, Instructor Raymond asks if they really want to admit the exam is rigged, concluding that this serves as a proper test of skill for the recruits. Then, Raymond adds that the exact same logic applies to the opposite scenario. Smirking at the sight, the instructor reflects that his eyes didn't deceive him, thoroughly impressed that the boy created such an unexpected wild card. Watching the crowd, Raymond notices that Demian's actions pushed every single candidate to make a move. With that thought, the man concludes that on the battlefield, real leaders are the ones capable of lighting a spark like that. Meanwhile, gasping for air from the effort, Demian counts that this is already the 29th lap out of 30. Picking up his pace on the course, the boy reminds himself that this is finally the last lap of the test. Matching his friend's pace, Apple calls out to Demian as he pulls up alongside him in the run. Running side by side on the track, Apple remarks that he still looks completely fine and asks if that was all planned, leaving the young man asking what he's talking about. Looking back at the exhausted competitors collapsed on the ground, his companion considers that both of them would have ended up the exact same way if they couldn't use mana. With a subtle smirk, Demian replies that there's no reason to hold back a resource when you have an ace up your sleeve. Amused by the answer, Apple enthusiastically states that the boy is a truly interesting guy. As they cross the finish line together, the young man returns the compliment, saying his friend is one too. Watching the outcome of the race, the instructor announces in surprise that both of them have officially passed. In a luxurious office, a military leader is surprised to learn that a promising recruit has joined the training center. Standing before him, the subordinate confirms the news brought by Instructor Raymond, revealing that the boy is only 13 years old. Resting his hand on the desk, the man reflects on how rare high praise is coming from such a strict instructor. His curiosity growing, he admits he's quite intrigued by this new recruit's arrival. Turning around, the eye-patched man asks for the boy's name. Meanwhile, in the academy courtyard, a large crowd gathers around the bulletin board to check the results. Looking at the list of accepted recruits, several candidates break down in despair upon realizing they failed. Amidst the surrounding celebrations, Demian watches the crowd and wonders if there's really any reason for such excitement. He recalls how during the war, recruitment was forced, and everyone tried to dodge the draft at all costs. Comparing the two eras, he reflects that the present is still peaceful, until he suddenly hears Apple calling his name. Turning around, the boy is congratulated by his companion, who celebrates that they are now fellow officers. Surprised by the news, Demian asks if he passed too, only to learn his own name was at the very top of the list. Pointing directly at the printed document, Appel shows him where his passing score was recorded. Right after, his peer mentions he looks forward to working together, receiving a friendly reply back. As they walk together through the courtyard, Appel asks what he plans to do during the week before enlistment, and Demian replies that he'll be quite busy. With a calm gaze, Demian explains he has a few loose ends to tie up over the coming week. Curious about his answer, Apple leans in to ask about these plans, and the boy explains they are just basic preparations and shopping before signing up. Taking advantage of the topic, his peer advises him to buy heel protectors due to how stiff the military boots are, catching the young man off guard. Remembering his past, Demian reflects that he already knows this reality all too well from personal experience. Even so, the boy thanks him for the tip and promises to keep it in mind, while Apple tells him not to worry about it. Curious about his partner, Demian asks what his plans are for the next few days, and his companion replies that he also has duties to attend to. Noticing his friend's mysterious tone, the boy smirks and asks if that's really true. Saying his goodbyes, Demian agrees to meet up in a week and takes off first. As he watches his companion walk away, Apple remains in the courtyard until he senses a hooded figure approaching from behind. The newcomer asks who that boy was, prompting Apple to immediately greet him by the name of Alan. Thoughtful after the scene, Alan asks what Demian's true motive was for joining the military. Recalling the high level of mana control Demian displayed during the run, he points out that the boy is definitely no ordinary recruit. At the time, the boy had jokingly asked if his friend was also bragging about not being ordinary, drawing a laugh from Apple. Right after, Demian simply added that the military was the only place he truly belonged. Recalling those words, Apple concludes with a smile that the young man certainly has his reasons, ones he can't easily share. Seeing his companion's doubts, Apple remarks that he feels he'll keep crossing paths with that boy for a long time to come. Without further explanation, the young man decides to move on while his servant confirms that everything is ready for their departure. Glancing back, Apple warns the man never to call him young master in public places. Faced with the warning, the attendant immediately apologizes for the slip-up. Meanwhile, the bustling streets of the capital remain filled with trade and people moving throughout the city. Walking through the crowd, Demian looks at his surroundings, finding the whole sight unbelievable. The boy recalls that in his memories, the capital used to be a place defined by extreme misery and despair. In those dark times, the needy begged desperately in the gutters for even a single piece of bread. Aware that this peace will only last another 5 years, the young man knows he must prepare quickly for the changes to come. With that priority in mind, Demian decides his first step will be to find the Work Merchant Guild. He considers that during times of war, food supplies and practical gear will become the most valuable assets in the kingdom. Given this scenario, he realizes the crucial role merchant guilds will play in the future. Demian remembers that in the past, the Work Guild eventually became the wealthiest and most influential group on the entire continent. Back in those bloody days of war, wounded and exhausted soldiers waited desperately for aid in their camps. That's when a subordinate came running to notify the captain about the arrival of emergency supplies. Seeing the dust from the carriages in the distance, one of the men asks if that group is the Work Merchant Guild. Another soldier then remarks that they're the richest guild around, while his buddy complains about suffering in war while merchants profit. Stepping into the conversation, the captain warns them that without the wheat and weapons they sell, everyone there would already be dead. Embarrassed by the warning, the recruit admits he knows that and confesses he was just feeling jealous. Watching the unloading, the leader reflects that maintaining continuous charitable work with all that money is no easy task. He then orders his men to go fetch the emergency supplies, receiving a prompt confirmation from the group. Walking through the camp, the captain watches the bustle of people around the carriages from afar. Hurrying over, the subordinate informs his superior that the figure up ahead seems to be the leader of the Work Merchant Guild. Intrigued by the news, the young captain asks if it's really him, and the soldier confirms it by pointing to the person in the white robe leading the way. Staring at the figure covered in the white cloak, the young man notices how remarkably arrogant the guy acts. Back in the present, the sun lights up the city's quiet buildings and alleyways. Lost in thought in the alley, Demian recalls that the Work Merchant Guild was doing charitable work even before the war. Analyzing the situation, the boy calculates that out of the capital's 40 guilds, he can narrow his search down to about 7 options. Knowing they engage in charity, the young man decides he should start by investigating the largest organizations in town. As the sun begins to set on the horizon, the sky turns golden over the surrounding mountains. Stopping in front of yet another door, Demian sighs and wonders if this will finally be the last guild on his list. Right after, a man walks down the hallway and asks what the boy is doing there. Respectfully greeting the man, the youth explains that he came to propose an investment to support the guild's social cause. With a friendly laugh, the man praises Demian's mature mindset for someone of such a young age. Getting comfortable in the room, the man formally introduces himself as Work, the head of that merchant guild. Shocked to realize he has finally found who he was looking for, Demian confirms his name, while the merchant invites him to sit down and talk. Sitting at the table, the young man directly asks if the merchant happens to have a son. Amused by the question, Work laughs and replies that he doesn't have a son, but he does have a rather immature daughter. Surprised by the answer, Demian asks if it's a daughter, wondering if this place might be another mistake. At that exact moment, the sound of the door opening makes the boy turn around to look back. Hearing a female voice announce her arrival, the young man's eyes widen in complete shock. Staring at the girl who just entered the room, Demian recognizes the figure from his past life and realizes he has finally found her. Introducing the young visitor, Work asks Deal to introduce herself to Demian and explains that he came to invest in the guild's charity. With a friendly smile, Deal warmly greets the boy. When asked about the proposal, the boy confirms he came to invest in their charitable work. Looking at the girl, Demian reflects that the guild leader in the future was a man, but she is the same age and looks strikingly similar. Intrigued by this discovery, the boy wonders if the future leader was actually this girl taking on her father's name. Curious to know more, the young girl asks how much Demian plans to invest in the project. Calmly, the boy replies that he intends to make an initial investment of 300 gold coins and increase the amount over time. Hearing that exorbitant figure, both are stunned and ask if he is serious. Regaining his composure, Work notes that since this is an investment and not a donation, he would like to know what the boy wants in return. With a smile, Demian reveals that he wants shares and a portion of the guild's profits in return. Impressed by the request, the merchant reflects on how such a young boy is capable of making such a bold offer. Curious about the source of such wealth, the man politely asks where all that money came from. Patiently, Demian reassures him, stating he simply wants to put his late parents' inheritance to good use. At that response, Work apologizes for his pryness, and the boy assures him he completely understands the question. Wrapping up the conversation, the merchant says he will need to gather the guild before giving a final answer, and Demian agrees to wait for their response. Noticing the sudden silence, the girl turns in concern and asks her father what is wrong with him. With a smile on his face, Work remarks on how impressive it is that the boy is only 13 years old. Observing the boy's composure, the merchant considers that he is definitely no ordinary child. Then, the man jokingly comments to his daughter that it's a shame the boy isn't 5 years older to be her perfect match. Completely embarrassed by the teasing, Deal instantly shouts at her father, scolding him. As the conversation continues, Work teases further, asking if the young man wouldn't prefer older girls, making his daughter beg him to stop. After finalizing the deal with the Merchant Guild, time flies until the day of enlistment finally arrives. Looking up at the sunny sky, Demian reflects that this moment marks his true fresh start. Reaching his hand toward the sky, the boy thinks that although his past life was in vain, this new opportunity will be different. Clenching his fist tightly, the young boy promises himself that this time he will rule the entire empire. Entering the barracks, Demian tries to remember if he was really assigned to the first squad of the 3rd Company. Looking around the room, the boy realizes he doesn't recognize anyone and wonders if Apple ended up in another group. Placing his luggage on the bed, the boy regrets his companion's absence, as he was the only one his age. Suddenly, a voice from the entrance welcomes everyone, making Demian turn around curiously. Introducing himself to the recruits, the man announces he is Brian, the leader of the first squad, and that he will be with them for the next month. Starting the inspection, Brian warns everyone that he will immediately check their personal belongings, including food and drinks. The leader then adds that luxury items, alcohol, and tobacco must be handed over right away, promising severe punishment for anyone who tries to hide anything. Hearing the orders, a few recruits quickly try to make excuses to hand over the contraband they brought. Right after, Brian shouts for everyone to empty their bags immediately. Approaching Demian's bed, the instructor examines the items laid out and remarks that there's nothing special there. Looking closely at the boy, Brian asks how old he is, finding him incredibly young. Without hesitation, Demian answers that he is only 13, leaving the instructor completely stunned by the response. Overhearing the conversation nearby, a recruit scoffs, saying the world has lost its mind, and asks if the kid just came looking for an easy life. Noticing the boy's silent reaction, the guy gets annoyed and demands to know why he is being stared at. Calmly closing his eyes, Demian reflects that it isn't worth wasting his breath on someone like that. However, the boy promises to memorize the heckler's face to show him later that getting beaten by a kid hurts just the same. Suddenly feeling an unexplained chill, the man is caught off guard when Brian snaps at him. Stopping in front of him, the squad leader orders the guy to show his belongings, while the recruit stammers, claiming he has already taken everything out. With an intimidating smile, Brian threateningly asks if he will need to search the bag himself. Panicking from the intimidation, the man rushes to dump his luggage onto the bed, turning over all his hidden items. In a threatening tone, Brian warns everyone that there will be severe consequences if he finds any hidden contraband. The squad leader then warns that he will make the offenders run laps around the training grounds all night long. As Brian orders everyone to hurry up and empty their bags, Demian simply watches, thinking the guy got what he deserved. Finishing the inspection, the instructor concludes that the barracks search is finally over. Brian then explains that he needs to appoint a temporary leader to command the group in his absence. With that, the man pulls a piece of paper from his pocket to check the recruit report. Looking at the document, Brian mentions that there's a recruit in the squad who passed the exam with outstanding scores. Right after, the instructor calls out Demian's name and asks which one of them is the guy. Looking toward the furious recruit, Brian wonders if it's him, remembering that a leader needs good character in addition to skill. Approaching the bunk, the leader asks if he's the recruit he's looking for, but the answer leaves him intrigued. Realizing he got the wrong person, Brian gets confused, wondering who the standout recruit actually is. At that exact moment, the instructor turns around in surprise, noticing Demian standing right in front of him. Stunned by the sight, Brian asks if he's really the 13-year-old kid from the report, and Demian calmly confirms it. Hearing the confirmation, the angry recruit mutters in outrage at the sight of a kid taking charge of the squad. Facing the protest, Brian tells the guy to shut up immediately, but the man insists on questioning the decision. Gesticulating angrily, the recruit argues that the temporary leader should represent the commander and have proven leadership. Pointing directly at the boy, the man claims that the entire squad's discipline will collapse if a child takes that position. With a faint smirk, Demian quietly thinks to himself that he didn't even care about the role since it's a hassle, but the guy just keeps pushing him. Deciding to hit back, the boy states he'd do a much better job than a muscle-brained idiot, leaving his opponent furious. Intervening in the argument, Brian confirms if the recruit's name is Kyle and announces he will appoint the representative. Right after, the squad leader grabs Kyle's shoulder firmly. Exuding an intimidating presence, Brian warns him that there won't be a mere warning next time he insults his comrade. Feeling pressured by his superior's threat, Kyle swallows hard and quickly answers that he understands the order. Softening his tone, Brian admits to the recruits that the man has a point when he says leadership requires proven ability. Seizing the opening, Kyle suggests an alternative to his superior, before correcting the offensive term he almost used. Next, the recruit proposes a direct duel against Demian to fairly decide who will take command. Turning to the young boy, Brian asks if he agrees to the terms of this contest. Accepting the offer without hesitation, Demian says he agrees and thinks about the need to establish discipline in the barracks. Pointing his finger at his opponent, the boy mockingly says that crushing that pile of muscles will settle the matter. Turning to the other recruits in the barracks, Brian asks if everyone agrees to the match and receives a unanimous yes. Seeing this, the squad leader declares there's no more time to waste and orders everyone to follow him to the dueling grounds. Walking alongside the group, Kyle taunts that the fight is starting right now. At that statement, Demian simply stares at him in silence, keeping his composure. Standing before the group in the courtyard, Brian explains that the duel ends as soon as one side forfeits, asking if both are ready. With a smirk, Kyle promptly declares that he's good to go. Staying calm, Demian confirms he's ready for the fight as well. With both fighters confirmed, the squad leader officially announces the start of the duel. While the recruit mocks him, saying he feels bad about going hard on a kid, Demian tells the guy to stop trembling and just make a move. Consumed with rage, the man roars furiously at the boy's response. Charging forward at high speed, the opponent yells that the kid is going to get beaten black and blue for running his mouth. Watching the quick rush, Demian calculates that the guy's speed isn't bad compared to the soldiers from his past life. Still, the boy quietly concludes that his rival's performance is average at best. As a heavy punch swings down, the young man reflects that such skill doesn't even come close to his true level. Dodging with effortless ease, Demian lets the opponent's powerful strike hit nothing but the ground. His eyes wide with shock, Kyle can barely believe the boy dodged as if he already knew the exact trajectory of the attack. Unleashing another strike, the man demands to know where he learned those cheap tricks, swearing the next blow won't miss. Watching the fist swing through thin air, Demian simply notes that his opponent's movements were far too slow. Overcome with hatred, Kyle clasps his fists together and screams that he'll crush him into the ground if he tries to dodge again. Leaping fiercely, the man comes down with a heavy strike right toward the boy. With a swift tilt of his head, the young man dodges the downward strike without breaking a sweat. Clueless as to where the boy went, the opponent hears Demian's voice stating he's right behind him. Focusing his energy at the exact right moment, the young man prepares his counterattack. With a single landed punch, the boy hits his opponent's stomach with extreme force. Right after, Demian points out that a mana-infused strike like that will make it tough for his rival to get back up. Even so, the opponent manages to push himself off the ground, making the boy realize he's tougher than he looked. Pushing through the pain with a roar, the man charges again, swearing he'll kill him no matter what. Easily dodging the sloppy rush, Demian decides it's time to end the fight. In the exact same moment, the boy lands another powerful blow right on his opponent. From the force of the hit, the man collapses to the ground, screaming in agony, while the young man claims victory. Staring at the unconscious rival on the ground, the other recruits watch in absolute shock. Clapping his hands to dust them off, Demian remarks that he took care of the guy, then turns toward the rest. Gazing at the group with a firm look, the boy asks if anyone else wants to test their luck. Faced with that display of power, the recruits quickly shake their heads, denying any intention to fight. With the duel over, the leader declares Demian victorious and officially appoints him as squad leader. Sometime later, the defeated opponent announces he's leaving as he steps out of the infirmary. Walking down the hallway, the recruit fumes as he remembers getting knocked out and carried all the way there. Recalling the fight, Kyle admits he blacked out the exact second he took that first hit. Standing in front of the room's door, the man acknowledges he ended up beaten on the floor, despite believing he was the strongest one there. As he opens the door to the barracks, he catches the other recruits completely off guard. Noticing his approach, one of the recruits nervously whispers that they need to hold Kyle back before he gets beaten up again. Stepping forward with determination, the man calls out to Demian to get the boy's attention. At that exact moment, the recruit drops to his knees before the young man, admitting defeat and recognizing him as his captain. Completely taken aback by the gesture, Demian silently wonders if the guy took too hard of a hit to the head during the fight. Looking up at the boy, Kyle explains that he was the strongest opponent he's ever faced, and that showing respect to the strong is only natural. Hearing his rival ask to serve him, Demian reflects in silence that the man had more honor than he let on. Dismissing formal titles, the young man asks not to be called captain, telling him he can just use his name. With a warm smile, Demian extends his hand, suggesting they get along from here on out. Grasping the boy's hand firmly, Kyle enthusiastically agrees, stating he looks forward to working together too. A week after that incident, the instructors yell at the soldiers to keep moving and stay focused on running around the courtyard. Pacing past the exhausted recruits, the boy notes that the training workload has been intense enough to make time fly. Calling an end to the session, the instructor orders everyone back to the barracks, except for Demian, who needs to come with him. Surprised by the sudden order, the young man wonders where they're going without any prior notice. Standing outside the massive door to the administrative office, the boy wonders if there's going to be some kind of official announcement. As soon as the door opens, Demian notices the other squad representatives are already gathered inside. Stepping into the room, the young man figures he'll find out the reason for the summons once he hears out his superior. Seeing him enter, one of the recruits mocks the boy's height in a provocative tone, comparing his face to a praying mantis. Observing the guy, Demian silently thinks he'd make a funny contrast standing next to Kyle, since they're complete opposites. Annoyed by the stare, the recruit demands to know what he's looking at, but the boy fires back by poking fun at his narrow eyes. Irritated by the nerve, the man grumbles in frustration while the surrounding recruits try to hold back their laughter. Seeing the commotion, the commander steps in, telling everyone to shut up and asking if they think it's appropriate to cause a scene in a place like this. As the superior takes center stage, the recruit mutters a threat, warning Demian that he'll deal with him later. Then the officer explains he called them together to announce a squad versus squad group battle happening in a week. Ordering the leaders to prepare their units well for the evaluation, the commander receives a unanimous "yes sir" from everyone. With the meeting over, the commander orders everyone back to their respective barracks. Right at the exit, the provocative recruit calls out to Demian in a challenging tone. Raising his fist, the man threatens that the kid will get hurt if he keeps acting so arrogant. Stepping into the argument, another leader fires back that he's the one being out of line for picking on the kid's age, telling him to go train his own squad. Irritated by the interference, the bully tells them to mind their own business, but the newcomer questions if he's really sure who would get beaten up there. Ignoring the bickering, the guy tells Demian to walk away and leave the jerk talking to himself. As they start walking, the kid pauses briefly, remembering an important question. Turning to his rival, Demian asks which group he belongs to and hears his opponent reply that he leads the 4th squad. With a smirking grin, the young man says he'll keep that in mind and promises to meet him again to settle the score in combat. Heading back down the hallway, the companion beside him asks if he really is Demian. When asked how he knew his name, the guy explains that Apple talks about him a lot for topping the practical exam rankings. Introducing himself as Gerard, the 3rd squad leader says he's eager to see what Demian can do in the tournament, and the young man promises he won't disappoint. Arriving at his barracks, the kid slams the door open and commands all the recruits to pay attention. Curious about the bold entrance, Kyle approaches to ask what happened. In front of the gathered group, Demian announces that in 1 week, they'll face the other squads in head-to-head combat, stressing that they need to get ready. Raising the flag before his unit, Demian declares they will take first place no matter what. Clapping his hands to get everyone's attention, he adds, "There's one more important detail about the 3 opposing squads." Spreading his arms wide, the kid announces that their goal is to completely crush the 4th squad. Making a throat-slashing gesture, Demian makes it clear that everyone's main target must be that team's leader. By the 2nd week of training, the atmosphere across the grounds had completely shifted. Standing before the assembled recruits, the instructor explains that the army exists to win, announcing that this week they'll learn essential tactics for large-scale battles. He adds that while this will be a squad exercise, extra points will be awarded to individuals who stand out. Hearing the crowd cheer at the news, Demian realizes everyone is chasing a high score to get into the officer training course. With a confident smirk, the young man simply mutters for everyone to give it their all. Shortly after, the instructor announces they'll be learning the wedge formation used to breach enemy lines. He details that while this strategy packs immense destructive power, the rear will collapse if the point of the spear falls. Studying the concept, Demian figures that as long as the tip holds firm, their momentum will burst forward. Noting his squad already has the perfect person to lead it. Facing the courtyard, the instructor orders everyone to split into 2 teams and practice the wedge formation immediately. Dividing the roles, Demian tells Kyle to take the opposing side, while his companion vows he won't lose this time. Gathering his squad, the boy tells everyone to fall in and build the structure exactly as instructed. Curious about his leadership, one of the recruits asks if he's done this before, and Demian replies that he learned it from his father, a military man. Huddling his teammates together, the boy whispers that the other team will stick to the standard method taught in class. Excited by the strategy, the recruits chuckle enthusiastically and agree to put the plan into action. Taking the lead, Demian orders the strongest recruits to line up right behind him, while the smaller ones raise their shields on the flanks. Next, he instructs his squad to keep their shields high to fully protect their heads. Noticing the opposing squad taking a defensive stance, the young man smiles, knowing it won't change a thing. Picking up the pace, he orders no one to slow down so they can shatter the rival formation in a single push. Standing in the courtyard, the instructor gives the signal, officially starting the combat simulation. With that, both lines advance in sync, shields raised for the inevitable clash. As he leads the charge, Demian notes with satisfaction that his squad is moving in perfect alignment. Seeing the enemy line close enough, the young man commands everyone to pick up the tempo. An instant later, the two formations collide violently in the courtyard as shields crash together. Deciding to act, Demian channels his hidden energy, remembering he saved this exact reserve for the collision. Unleashing that power, the boy yells for his team to push through the block with everything they've got. With this reinforced surge, the young man shatters the opponent's defense in one crushing blow. Capitalizing on the opening, Demian orders his men to drive through the breach just as planned. Caught off guard by the sudden assault, the opponents hesitate, unsure of who should cover the gap in their line. Seeing the enemy falter, the boy spots the perfect opportunity to lock in their advance. With a final command from Demian, the squad thrusts their spears forward over their shields to finish the maneuver. With that move, the spearheads strike the opponent's legs with precision, sweeping the blockade clean away. Blindsided by the low attack, the rival recruits hit the ground, completely clueless about what hit them. Watching his line fall apart, Kyle screams at his men to get back on their feet immediately. Overwhelmed by frustration, he curses and decides to charge in solo to hold back the momentum. Intercepting the rush with his shield, Demian reminds his rival that he was his actual opponent all along. Trying to force his way through in a rage, Kyle barks at the kid to get out of his path. Agilely stepping aside, the boy mockingly asks if that was really what he wanted. Losing his leverage sends the man stumbling forward in shock, while the boy simply nods along. Using his opponent's own momentum, Demian plants a hand on his back and slams him to the ground. Looking down at the fallen rival, the young man remarks that he has a solid build, but needs to learn how to use that strength wisely. Watching the outcome from afar, the instructor silently acknowledges that the kid is even more impressive than the reports claimed. The officer muses that despite having average physical specs, it's hard to believe Demian is just another ordinary recruit. Calling a halt to the session, the superior calls the round and officially grants the victory to the young leader's squad. Extending a hand to his companion, Demian praises the good effort, while Kyle insists he'll take the win next time. Curious about the play, a recruit asks how that tactic worked, and if they exploited the gap on purpose. Watching the scene, soldiers from the other group gossip about using that exact strategy in the platoon battle while keeping an eye on Demian. Glancing back, the boy notices that recruits who used to dodge tough drills are now reviewing their own mistakes and practicing on their own. Pleased with everyone's drive, the young man figures he doesn't need to worry about the battle, until a sneering voice from the back asks if a literal child is leading the squad. Hearing the provocation, Demian turns around, intrigued to see where the comment came from. Pointing right at the boy, the guy mocks his leadership during the drill, asking if the teammates following him are just plain stupid. Furious at the insults, Kyle steps up, demanding to know how they dare call their leader a kid. Undeterred, the heckler smirks, replying he sees no issue with it, and calling the squad's skill level downright pathetic. Approaching with disdain, the leader of the 4th platoon tells them to brush it off, blaming the boy for playing pretend commander and not knowing his place. Recognizing his rival from the meeting, Demian simply watches the guy in silence, thinking the man is practically begging for a beating. Choosing to ignore the bait and settle it all during the platoon battle, the young man tells the 1st platoon to head back to the barracks, when a furious roar commands them to stop. Taken aback by the extreme reaction, the boy looks back as the yelling continues. Shouting at the top of their lungs, the recruits from the 4th platoon vow to settle the score in the group battle, telling their rivals to prepare for defeat. Pointing wildly at the squad, one of the men spews direct threats, warning them they'd better prepare to die. Taking in the scene, Kyle steps up to Demian to confirm if that was really the 4th platoon mentioned earlier, receiving a firm nod in response. Cracking his knuckles in a fit of rage, the ally declares they will crush their opponents without mercy in the fight. Fired up by the rivalry, the recruits swear to give up their rest and train until they defeat the 4th squad. Watching his comrades' dedication, Demian thinks to himself that he didn't expect such drive just from a bit of taunting. With a smile on his face, the young man concludes that this extra motivation isn't bad for the group at all. Meanwhile, in the main office, the commander and the chief instructor talk in private about the recruits. Leaning back in his chair, Maris asks his subordinate if any promising recruits stood out in the new batch of soldiers. In response, Raben says there are a few decent candidates, but points out one in particular who really catches the eye. Looking over Demian's file, Maris notes how young he is, while Raben reveals that the rookie seems to know how to manipulate mana. Surprised by this, the commander asks if these recruits come from noble blood, but learns there's no trace of it in their backgrounds. Glancing at the papers, Maris reflects that most draftees are commoners to whom mana is entirely alien due to the high cost of training techniques. Pointing to the documents on the desk, Raben adds that the plainness of Demian's and the other boys' records is so extreme it's almost suspicious. Changing the subject, Maris mentions hearing about an incident between the squads, and the instructor confirms the clash involved the young recruit. Explaining what happened, Raben says the boy's young age in a leadership role caused friction with the commander of the 4th squad. The instructor then reports that the 1st squad took Demian's side and fully rallied together to accept him as their official leader. Impressed by the story, Maris shows keen interest upon confirming that the unit truly embraced the kid. With a thoughtful gesture of his fingers, the commander proposes a new plan to test the team's ability in the upcoming battle. Hearing the proposal in the office, Raben looks uneasy and hesitates before questioning his superior's decision. The subordinate asks if the idea might end up backfiring on the rookies, but Maris replies that it would simply prove the group's limits. The commander then adds that if the boys' bond collapses over this hurdle, it means they were never worth much to begin with. With a smirk, the commander orders the training intensity for both the 1st and 4th squads to be cranked to the absolute maximum. On the very first day of the new regime, the recruits are left completely exhausted and bewildered as to why the demands spiked so suddenly. Lying in the barracks, one of the recruits asks why they suddenly added more training, while his squad mate notes that only the 1st and 4th platoons were given this extra load. Next, another soldier complains that they even added low-crawl drills, questioning if the higher-ups aren't overreacting because of a silly fight. Faced with these complaints, Kyle turns to Demian and asks if any of this makes sense to him. Calmly, the young man replies that he understands the instructor's goal perfectly, reasoning that they have no choice but to follow the routine. Right after, the boy stands up in the middle of the room and sarcastically asks his comrades if they joined the army just to have fun. He explains that low-crawl training will be tough on their bodies, but assures them that pushing through it will build physical endurance far superior to the other platoons. Hearing this, the recruits silently acknowledge their leader's determination, agreeing that complaining won't change anything in their lives. Smiling at the team, Demian acknowledges how hard the first time is, but promises to help everyone overcome this challenge. Still hesitant, a recruit asks if they will really train on the rocky terrain, prompting the boy to sarcastically ask if he was expecting soft blankets spread across the ground. Surprised by how natural he sounds, Kyle comments that Demian talks as if he's done this many times before, and Demian confirms that he actually has. Recalling his wartime past, the young man remembers the countless times he had to crawl across the ground just to survive. With a subtle smile, he reflects that this isn't even the real purpose behind the crawl training. He considers that piling such an exhausting exercise onto a heavy routine only serves to generate stress as injuries start to cover their bodies. He adds that soldiers under such intense pressure will inevitably break down and end up fighting among themselves. Watching his squad mates in the barracks, Demian concludes that the superiors want to test which of the 2 platoons can hold together under all this pressure. Seeing through the superior's obvious intentions, the young man kneels beside his bed and tells everyone to grab their issued socks. Confused by the sudden order, the recruits ask why they're using the socks, to which Demian replies that he's going to perform a little magic trick. Firmly adjusting the fabric over his hands, the boy guarantees that this will make the crawl exercise truly worthwhile. At the training yard, the instructor asks if the 1st platoon is present, receiving a unanimous confirmation from the soldiers. Introducing himself as the one in charge of crawl training, the man announces he'll be teaching the low crawl and calls for his assistant. Ordering the assistant to take position, the officer explains that the demonstration requires lying flat on the ground while holding the spear out front. He then instructs everyone to move quickly, alternating their knees and hands along the course. Shouting back in unison that they're ready, the recruits impress the man with the visible determination in their eyes. With that, the officer orders the 1st squad to advance to the course and gives the signal to start. At that exact moment, the soldiers dash forward, crawling at high speed under the barbed wire. Watching the scene, the instructor questions the commander's intent in moving that training up to the 2nd week. Looking over the rocky ground, the man considers that the painful impact with the terrain would normally have made the rookies hesitate. However, the officer's eyes widen as he notices the unusual performance of these recruits. Right before his eyes, the group pushes forward, navigating the obstacles at an impressive speed. As his assistant calls out to him, the instructor stands stunned, unable to believe this is their very first crawl drill. Seeing the officer's hesitation, Demian asks when the second squad should advance, making the man startle and hurriedly give the order to go. Immediately after, the rest of the soldiers charge through the course with fury, overcoming the obstacles without a shred of fear. Impressed by the group's ferocity, the instructor is taken aback, commenting that those recruits look like actual berserkers in battle. Scratching his head with a subtle smile, the boy remarks that the man will hardly ever see anyone do this well on their first day of training. Approaching enthusiastically, Kyle tells Demian that was amazing, joking that he couldn't even pretend to be injured because of how fast the drill went. Showing off the folded socks protecting his arms and knees, the recruit admits the ground was rocky, but promises the trick helped immensely. Celebrating around Demian, the team praises their leader and openly declares that the young man is a genius. Shortly after, the officer announces the end of the first platoon's crawl training and orders everyone back to the barracks. As they walk back, Kyle asks curiously where he learned such an effective trick. Demian replies that he learned it from his late father, but warns them that there's another important detail he needs to caution them about. The young man warns that they must never get caught using this protection by the instructor, recalling the severe punishment he received in the past when he was caught. Bursting into a loud laugh, his squad mate slaps Demian hard on the back, praising his cleverness, while the boy simply swallows the pain from the blow. Looking at the weapon rack in the distance, the young man ponders that only spear and shield training remains to learn the kingdom's official style. Demian reflects that many look down on this spear art, thinking it's too simple compared to noble styles, but he knows that mastering it completely makes it just as formidable as any other. The young man concludes that most people abandon the training once they learn the basics, remembering that in his past life, that technique was his only path to survival. The boy recalls pushing himself to the limit until he found his master, who helped him evolve even further. Thinking of his old mentor, Demian silently hopes that the two of them can meet again someday. Back in the hallway, recruits from another group complain exhaustedly about the routine of standing guard in the extreme cold wearing heavy gear. Watching the scene, Kyle notes that the 4th platoon has also just finished training, while Demian observes their behavior. Annoyed by his exhausted comrades, the 4th platoon leader shouts, demanding to know why everyone is complaining so much. In the face of that heated argument, the soldiers of the 1st platoon watch the commotion in surprise. Angered by his demands, the recruits of the 4th platoon push back, warning him that being the leader doesn't give him the right to boss the group around. Watching the friction from a distance, the 1st unit recruits comment that they would have ended up the same way if not for the protective gear they wore. While Demian's team laughs and gives thanks for the gear they received, their rival watches the group, gritting his teeth. Unable to understand their neighbor's composure, the members of the 4th squad suspect they used some kind of trick and blame them for the harsh training. Clenching his fists, the opponent vows to himself that he will eliminate the 1st squad in the tournament in just a few days. Consumed by rivalry, the man swears he will take first place in the clash at any cost. In contrast, Demian keeps a calm gaze as he awaits the moment of the competition. As time passes, the day of the grand tournament between the squads finally dawns over the mountains. In front of the 4 units gathered in the courtyard, the officers confirm everyone's presence and order the recruits to wait for the matches to be called. Upon hearing his name, Demian turns around and asks what Kyle wants with him. Looking closely at the boy, Kyle remarks that he looks different somehow, though he thinks it might just be his imagination. When asked if he got taller, Demian simply replies that it's just the result of his natural growth. Overhearing the conversation, the other recruits burst into laughter and tell Kyle to stop picking on the kid. In silence, Demian wonders in surprise if his squadmate noticed his change purely by instinct. The boy remembers that just last night, he managed to advance to the 2nd stage of his mana cultivation, significantly boosting his energy. After all, ever since arriving at the training camp, the young man had been practicing his technique every single day without fail. Turning his attention to the comrade beside him, Demian calls out to him in a serious tone. Staring at his ally, the boy firmly declares that he wants their squad to win the tournament by an overwhelming margin. The youth recalls that the top 5 soldiers in the competition will be rewarded with any weapon or equipment from the armory. He reflects that most will choose ordinary weapons, or simple, low-level magical protection. However, Demian thinks of the special ring he heard about in his past life through a former subordinate. The boy knows this item possesses a permanent effect powerful enough to rival a skill book. To claim this valuable artifact, the young man concludes they must secure absolute first place overall in the event. Faced with this ambitious goal, Demian asks if his partner is up to the task, and Kyle confirms with a confident smile. With a firm handshake, the two seal the deal to guarantee victory together. Next, Kyle rallies everyone's attention and announces that their group leader promised to crush the competition and take undisputed first place. Hearing the declaration, the recruits respond with enthusiasm, assuring that the unit's victory is certain. Pleased with the team's reaction, the instructor announces the match brackets and calls the first squad to step forward. Leading his comrades' march into the courtyard, Demian firmly declares that they will fight together until they reach the very top. As the clash begins, it's explained that the platoon competition is split into offense and defense, with teams switching sides after 2 rounds. Next, the rules dictate an automatic defeat if the flag isn't captured within the time limit, while the second platoon prepares for battle. Hearing the order to prepare for the first strike, Demian and his team stay focused on the front line. Before advancing, the young leader tells everyone to execute exactly what they practiced, receiving an enthusiastic confirmation from the group. Turning to his ally, Demian asks if he remembers the plan to push the enemy with full force on his signal, to which Kyle reassures him that raw power is his specialty. Right after, the signal to start the battle echoes across the courtyard, and both formations charge into an inevitable clash. Sprinting aggressively, the opponents rush forward, shouting that they will crush the rival team's defense. Facing the heavy charge, the recruits hold their shields firmly, yelling for no one to let the formation break. Shocked by the resistance, the attackers wonder where that strength is coming from, complaining that the defense looks like a solid wall with no openings. Watching from above, the spectators note that the second unit attacked first, but find it strange that such a tight formation is focusing solely on defense. That's when Demian gives the decisive order for everyone to push the enemy line all at once. Following the command, Kyle uses all his physical strength to thrust his shield forward, sending their rivals flying back. Pushed back violently, the attackers fall into panic while their leader fruitlessly commands them to hold their ground. Outraged by the turn of events, the enemy commander rants that they were supposed to be the ones attacking and orders his men to fall back on defense. Taking advantage of the enemy's chaos, Demian calls out to Kyle to execute the next phase of their strategy. Promising to go all out this time, Kyle charges with full force into the opponents. Stunned by the sight, the enemies wonder what kind of monster attacks using only his shoulders without even carrying a shield. Capitalizing on the impact, Kyle directs his teammates to line up right beside him immediately. Obeying the order, the recruits keep shoving the enemy formation with extreme force. Baffled by what's happening, the opponent questions how their coordination can be so flawless with the exact same amount of training. Noticing a gap in the rival defense, Demian commands the first platoon to push forward with everything they've got. With that order, the team devastates the enemy lines, kicking up a massive cloud of dust across the courtyard. Impressed by the result, one of the instructors asks the officer in charge if he gave the team extra training. Watching the battle, the officer silently reflects that these recruits are performing like seasoned elite soldiers. The superior officer concludes that the sole reason for such an impressive outcome is the presence of their young leader. In the heat of battle, Demian orders his men to spread out and completely shatter the second platoon's formation. The instructor recalls that every day after class, the boy gave extra instructions to the group to perfect their tactics. Keeping their shields raised above their shoulders, the soldiers shout for everyone to follow Demian's exact instructions. The officer smiles, reflecting that he was worried about a child taking command, but admits the boy earned it entirely on his own merit. Spotting the unguarded flag in the back, Demian calls for Kyle, declaring that this is the perfect chance to end the match. With a grin, Kyle looks around, asking where the objective is. Pinpointing the flag's exact location, the man smiles and announces he's finally found it. Panicking at the threat, the rival commander orders everyone to stop that advance and forget about attacking. Hearing the order, the defenders shout that they won't give them an inch, telling their team to group up immediately. Seeing the enemy's hesitation, Kyle mocks them as fools, while the opponents wonder why that monster is just standing there. With a smirk, the boy warns his opponents that they fell right into his trap. Hearing that revelation, the rival recruits panic, having no idea what trap he's talking about. At that exact moment, a high-speed dash blurs across the courtyard, catching the defense completely off guard. Using a fallen opponent as a springboard, Demian praises his teammates' excellent work. Launching into an impressive mid-air leap, the boy charges directly at the base's last defender. With a devastating strike from above, the youth hits his rival dead on, slamming him into the ground. As the opponent groans on the floor, the instructor calls time and confirms the second unit's failure. Raising the flag high, Demian claims victory for his team amidst the triumphant cheers of his comrades. Announcing a break before switching sides, the officer praises the group's performance, predicting the first platoon will easily win the tournament. However, another spectator steps in from the side, firmly stating he wouldn't be so sure about that outcome. Pointing toward the other side of the courtyard, one of the observers suggests they pay attention to the other match. Seeing the intensity of that fight, the man wonders if those fighters might actually be a worthy match for the first platoon. Hearing that remark, the leader of the 4th platoon stomps the ground in frustration and vents his anger. The man angrily complains that he intended to use the 3rd platoon as a mere warm-up before facing Demian. As they try to push through the enemy defenses, the soldiers panic, realizing their opponents aren't giving an inch. Irritated by the lack of progress, the 4th unit's commander screams at his men to follow the plan. However, his subordinates shout back that he's just barking orders from the rear without doing a thing on the front line. Noticing the rivals wearing down, Gerard asks Appel if they should break through their line right now, but receives a refusal. Staying calm, the boy advises him to focus on the enemy shield bearers and wait for the rival group to collapse on its own. Agreeing with the strategy, Gerard is impressed by how easily Apple can read the battlefield. Quietly, he thinks to himself that even though they've only known each other for a few weeks, he's really curious about Apple's true origins. Putting the plan into action, Gerard shouts for the team to hold their ground and focus on the opposing shield bearers. With that, the violent clash of shields echoes across the courtyard as the 3rd unit firmly holds off the charge. Unable to break through the wall, the leader of the 4th squad shouts accusations of cowardice at his opponents. Watching his rivals grow exhausted, Gerard realizes their morale is shattered and their impatience will bring them down. Overwhelmed by the brutal defense, the 4th squad's shield bearer groans, saying he can't hold out much longer. Capitalizing on the weak enemy defense, Gerard commands the 3rd squad to push forward immediately. Obeying the order, the recruits charge together, driving their shields forward with all their strength. Crushed by the violent assault, the opponents panic, desperately pleading for no one to break formation. Seeing an opening in the fight, Gerard calls out to Apple to follow up the attack. Right on cue, the young man sprints across the field at full speed, wielding his spear. Using the top of his teammate's shield as a springboard, he leaps high over the enemy wall. Soaring above the courtyard, Apple clears the defensive line in a single bound, right before their stunned eyes. Channeling energy around his spear, the boy swoops down with a devastating strike against the enemy backline. The sheer power of the impact wipes out the enemy squad, sending defenders flying across the ground. Furious at his team's total collapse, the leader of the 4th squad curses out his men, asking how they expect to beat the 1st squad playing like that. Glancing to the side, he glares at Gerard, who stands calmly on the other side of the courtyard. Right at that moment, the instructor calls the match, officially declaring victory for the 3rd squad. As the team celebrates, lifting Apple onto their shoulders, Demian watches closely, realizing Apple will be a formidable opponent. Looking at the final outcome, the boy concludes that the real challenge of the tournament will be against the 3rd unit. With a smirk, Demian says he can't wait for that moment and promises to meet Apple again in the grand final. As break time is called over, the instructor orders all squads to gather immediately at the training yard. Approaching his leader, Kyle confirms if the next match will be against the 4th squad, noting it's their rival's last chance to score any points. Ready for battle, his ally vows to crush the guy who insulted the boy, but Demian reveals he's already claimed that opponent and just asks them to clear the way. Turning to his team, the boy analyzes that their adversaries are already exhausted and their teamwork is completely shattered. Showing true determination, Demian declares he has no intention of holding back, promising to destroy them even faster and more decisively. Rallying his squad mates, Kyle celebrates the opportunity, stating their opponents need to pay for everything they said. Keeping his eyes on the prize, the boy emphasizes the match will be over in a flash and demands total focus from his allies. Following instructions, the recruits promptly reply that they understand their orders. Right after, the 1st squad takes up combat formation, with shields raised under Demian's command. Across the yard, the 4th unit takes their positions, ready to start the match. Facing the quiet courtyard, the instructor's command echoes, giving the signal to start the battle. As the match begins, the rival leader glares at the opposing formation, ready to withstand the impact. With that, both groups charge at full speed toward each other, shouting orders to advance. From above the yard, the rapid approach between the wedge formation and the opponent's defensive block can be seen. Watching the movement, Demian notices the enemy structure is even more disorganized than he imagined, realizing a direct charge will tear them to pieces. With a confident smirk, the boy promises to make this victory even more decisive to crush his rivals once and for all. Answering the call, Kyle charges forward violently, roaring against the defensive line. In the next instant, the fierce shield crash sends the enemy barrier flying into the air. Blown backward, the opponents scream in despair, unable to comprehend where such power was coming from. Witnessing the collapse, the leader of the 4th squad frantically shouts for his men to hold the line and block the advance. In sheer desperation, the man orders the shield bearers to protect the flag and stop the charge at all costs. At that exact moment, the boy leaps down from above, landing unexpectedly right in front of his opponent. Looking down on his rival, Demian mockingly reminds him that he promised to save his face for this moment. Paralyzed with shock, the man's eyes widen, unable to react to the boy's presence. Without giving him time to respond, the youth lands a precise strike on his opponent's neck, making him groan in pain. From the force of the impact, the man collapses to his knees on the yard, while the boy lands effortlessly on the ground. Gasping in rage, the man curses on his knees, claiming there's a limit to how much someone can be underestimated. Grabbing his spear from the ground, the opponent rises and shouts, asking if he looks like some kind of joke to the boy. Lashing out with a quick strike, he boasts confidently that in a one-on-one duel, defeating a kid would be easy. Dodging the attack with extreme calm, Demian merely whispers that the move was completely predictable. Looking down at his fallen rival with disdain, Demian asks if that was all he had to offer. With a swift motion, the boy disarms his opponent, sending the weapon flying away. Seeing the spear hit the ground, the youth scoffs at his rival for losing his weapon so easily. Giving him no room to react, the boy strikes his adversary violently, making the man let out a cry of pain. Pinning his rival's chest with his foot, Demian states that losing one's weapon on the battlefield is the same as asking to die. Channeling power into his hand, the boy tells the man to remember this advice well, as it will save his life. Delivering a devastating direct punch, the youth knocks his opponent out cold while asking if he understood the lesson. As the instructor rushes to tend to the unconscious soldier, Demian mutters that it was way too easy and boring. Seeing the condition of the defeated leader, the official announces that the 4th unit is no longer fit to continue the battle. Adjusting his posture before the yard, the officer proceeds to proclaim the final result of the match. With the flag raised high, victory is officially declared for the 1st squad amidst everyone's cheers. Radiant with the result, Kyle celebrates the win while their squad mates cheer for Demian's flawless performance. Watching the injured man being carried off on a stretcher, spectators comment in disbelief at how a mere 13-year-old boy possesses such skill. Impressed by the fight, veterans claim the youth is practically a prodigy and might even be superior to the instructors themselves. Smiling in agreement, the man accepts the praise until a mysterious figure approaches, asking what's so funny. Hearing the question, the soldier turns around to see who had arrived. It's Leonhardt Belkane, the famous training instructor from the kingdom's 3rd division. Instantly, both men salute, shouting greetings out of respect for the kingdom. Watching the celebration from afar, Leonhardt calls his subordinate and asks if that boy is the one he mentioned. The man confirms it as the group tosses Demian into the air in pure celebration. Seeing the unit's excitement, the instructor smiles, remarking that the recruit indeed looks interesting. Later, in the barracks, a recruit bursts through the door, loudly announcing the news. Amidst the commotion, his comrade asks the reason for all the fuss, and hears that a high-ranking figure just arrived at the training center. The youth adds that the visitor is a legendary 3rd Division instructor whom even their superiors respect. Hearing about the visitor, Demian asks for the man's name while his roommate tries to recall it. The recruit hesitates for a moment, asking if the name was Leonhardt. Right then, Demian quietly mutters the correct pronunciation, Leonhardt. Hearing the correction, his comrade confirms that was the exact name. Without offering any explanation, Demian immediately gets up and leaves, leaving his roommate asking where he's going. Dashing down the hallway, the youth sprints off while the other recruit wonders what came over him all of a sudden. Running with long strides, Demian thinks he needs to see the situation with his own eyes to confirm if it really is who he thought. Stopping abruptly in the corridor, the boy is stunned to spot the figure approaching, accompanied by another man. Pointing toward the boy, Leonhardt asks his companion if that wasn't the recruit Demian he had seen earlier. Upon seeing the young man standing there, the officer calls out his name and says he was actually on his way to find him. Placing his hand over his chest in a formal military salute, Demian shouts for the glory of the kingdom before his superior. Observing him closely, the visitor asks if his name really is Demian, receiving an immediate answer in the affirmative. Faced with that unexpected encounter, the young man reflects that the division was so far away, he thought it would take a long time to see the man again. Looking at the figure before him, Demian silently realizes he is reuniting with the person who influenced his life the most, his true master. Confronting the boy in the hallway, Leonhardt asks if he is Demian, mentioning he came to personally see the recruit Raymond praised so much. Looking closely at the young man, he notices he is practicing a surprisingly solid mana cultivation method. Leonhardt then praises the spear techniques he saw him use earlier and asks which unit he wants to join after finishing his training. Faced with the question about his future, Demian pauses briefly before revealing his choice. With a firm smile on his face, the boy openly declares his plan to join the Neocalis unit. Surprised by this statement, the instructor's eyes widen as he asks if the boy is actually serious. After all, Neocalis belongs to the 3rd Division and is tasked with containing the monsters of the Bronzal Forest, known as the most dangerous and lethal unit in the kingdom. Curious about the choice, Leonhardt asks why he prefers that place over an easy life in administration, to which Demian replies that he can become stronger there. Hearing this, Leonhardt offers to write a recommendation letter for the knighthood, shocking his subordinate, who reminds him that the post is reserved for nobility. Thanking him for the offer, Demian declines, stating his decision is made, and adds silently that he needs to reunite with someone in that division. Respecting the young man's decision, Leonhardt accepts his choice and tells the boy to return to the barracks and rest. Outraged by the refusal, the attendant yells at Demian, asking if he realizes the incredible opportunity he just threw away. The subordinate then asks for permission to try and convince the recruit one more time, but Leonhardt questions if he truly thinks the boy made the wrong choice. Continuing the conversation, the instructor adds that the man clearly failed to notice the resolve in Demian's eyes during their talk. Letting out a loud laugh, Leonhardt wonders where that kid came from, thinking that the fact he is only 13 makes it all the more intriguing. With a smile, Leonhardt orders his subordinate not to interfere any further, saying their paths will cross again if the boy really goes to the 3rd Division. The next day, before the clash against the 3rd Platoon, Demian warns his men that their opponent won't be easy. The young man then confidently assures them that no other squad in the training center can surpass them right now. With a smile, Kyle agrees, commenting that their team has gotten remarkably strong. Demian then rallies his squad to crush their opponents, just like they did in the previous matches. Right after, the instructor gives the signal to start the match and grants the first attack to the 3rd Platoon. As the match begins, Gerard shouts at his men to take their battle positions. Observing the enemy setup, Demian notices they are using the same solid formation as the day before. Meanwhile, Gerard reminds Appel that his role will be crucial this round, and the boy quietly agrees. The leader of the 3rd unit then commands his team to make an immediate push across the courtyard. As the front lines collide, the shields of both teams slam into each other with violent force. In the heat of battle, Demian yells for his men to push the enemy formation back. Shoving with all their strength, the recruits try to force a breach through the enemy blockade. Noticing the momentum of the push, Gerard sees that the opposing team is repeating the exact same pattern from the previous battle. Feeling the pressure on their defense, Gerard yells for Appel to make his move immediately. Suddenly, the shield wall splits down the middle, revealing Appel standing right in the center. Watching this unfold, Demian is caught off guard by the opponents opening their own shield wall, wondering what they're planning. Taking advantage of the clear path, the boy dashes forward at full speed, right toward the enemy squad. With a devastating strike, Apple smashes into the front line, sending the shield bearers flying back with groans of pain. Witnessing the impact, Demian's eyes widen, deeply impressed by the raw power shown by his rival. Seeing the push succeed, Gerard celebrates his comrade's feat and orders the squad to break through the opening. Intercepting the advance instantly, Kyle charges forward with his shield, roaring that he won't let the opponents do as they please. Crashing violently into the enemy formation, the warrior holds the line while the enemies panic at his tremendous strength. Watching the block, Demian thinks to himself that they managed to contain the attack at the last second thanks to Kyle. Analyzing the fight, the boy acknowledges Apple's talent for clearing out the shield bearers with a single swing. Staring at his rival from a distance, Demian wonders why a warrior from the north ended up in the 3rd training center of all places. Realizing the situation has gotten tricky, the young man notices the opposing giant, fixating his gaze right on him. Recalling their talk back at the barracks, Demian remembers telling his teammate to focus solely on Apple to keep their defense from being destroyed. At the time, his ally asked who this kid was, and Demian replied that he'd know the moment he faced him. Hearing that, the warrior flashed an intimidating smile, finally understanding who his true opponent would be. In front of the shield wall, Gerard asks if his comrade can break through the defense, and Appel replies that he has to do it at all costs. Realizing he won't be able to overpower his opponent with brute force alone, the boy decides to change his tactical approach. Focusing all his mana into his spear, Apple realizes there is only one option left to secure victory. The boy then charges forward at high speed, unleashing a direct thrust straight at the opponent's shield. Impressed by the perfect block, the surrounding recruits cheer for Kyle's incredible durability. Seeing his impact contained, Apple thinks that defending like that won't save his opponent for long. Ramping up the pressure of his assault, the young man vows to keep striking relentlessly until the barrier breaks. Pressed by the overwhelming force, Kyle swears under his breath, unable to comprehend how someone that young possesses so much power. With a devastating impact, Apple's charge shatters the wooden shield, sending his opponent stumbling back. Raising his weapon for the final blow, the boy shouts at the top of his lungs that this match is over. With no strength left to counter, the recruit simply crosses his arms in a desperate attempt to brace for the incoming blow. In that exact split second, Demian leaps in at high speed to intercept the enemy attack. A violent clash echoes across the courtyard as his spear locks down the opponent's strike. Staring firmly down his rival, Demian holds the block without giving up a single inch. Seeing the figure standing before him, Apple breaks into a radiant smile and speaks Demian's name. Witnessing the impressive block, Kyle is stunned by the sudden arrival that just saved him. Right after, the instructor calls time, announcing that the 3rd platoon lost for failing to capture the flag. Clutching his chest, Apple groans, regretting that he couldn't overpower the big guy and finish the battle easily. Concerned for his comrade, Demian asks if Kyle is all right, and his ally confirms that he is. Upon hearing the order to sit out the second half, Kyle gets furious and snaps back, insisting his bones aren't broken. Calmly, Demian explains that there are still 2 weeks of training left, warning him that worsening the injury could ruin his chance of graduating. Asking the warrior to guard the flag in the center, the young man tells him he's the only one he trusts for the job, leaving Kyle visibly moved by the gesture. Grasping the flagpole firmly, Kyle swears that no one will touch the objective and tells the squad to go up front and crush the enemy. Immediately after, the instructor orders the teams to swap sides and tells the 1st platoon to prepare their assault. Turning to his exhausted allies, Demian reminds them that this is the final round, warning that he doesn't intend to waste the entire time limit on the offensive. With a determined look in his eyes, the boy sets a strict time limit of just 5 minutes to settle the match. Adjusting his battle stance, the young man prepares to lead the decisive charge. On the other side of the courtyard, Apple and his teammates take their defensive positions, awaiting the collision. Leading his soldiers' march, Demian firmly declares that they will capture the rival flag and secure victory within that time frame. Facing the courtyard, the 2 platoons stand in perfect formation, waiting for the signal to begin. Watching the field, Demian reflects that this is finally the decisive match of the inter-unit competition. With a determined look, the boy considers that he has already shown everything he could as a temporary leader. Then, the young man concludes that this is the perfect moment to make a great impression on the instructors. Smiling with confidence, he promises to permanently make his mark in this evaluation. Looking at the opposing team, Demian calculates that defeating Apple's squad will practically secure his position as the top recruit. Noticing his classmate positioned in the back, he realizes Apple is defending the flag himself due to exhaustion from his first fight. Facing that formation, Demian acknowledges that a direct clash with his rival is completely inevitable. Right after, the instructor gives the start signal, ordering the 1st platoon to attack while the 3rd unit defends. Sprinting forward, the boy commands his team to advance at full speed and stay focused on following him. Seeing the lightning-fast charge, the defenders panic at the rival team's impressive speed and perfect cohesion. Sensing the threat, Gerard orders his men to raise their shields immediately and keep their full attention on Demian. Sliding across the ground during the assault, the young man calmly notes that their attempt at defense will be utterly useless. Focusing his energy into his weapon, Demian forcefully declares he will break through the enemy block. With an overwhelming leap, the boy delivers a powerful blow to shatter the enemy barrier all at once. At the impact of the blow, the defender panics as his wooden shield is pierced in a single strike. Taking advantage of the opening, the young man sweeps low with his spear, knocking 2 defenders to the ground. Surrounded by his energy, Demian shouts for his entire group to surge through the breach together. Facing this overwhelming charge, Gerard despairs and screams for his men to stop the enemy advance at all costs. While dodging incoming blows, the boy hears his opponents yelling that they need to bring him down immediately. Eyes fixed on the battle, he calculates the exact trajectory of their strikes with extreme precision. Moving low to the ground with agility, the young man makes the enemy thrusts strike nothing but air. Seeing their spears clash against empty space, the defenders are shocked to realize Demian has vanished from right in front of them. Quickly reappearing at their rear, the boy strikes a rival's leg, making him cry out as his ankle is hit. Without wasting time, he turns around and orders his entire platoon to regroup and solidify their advance. At his command, The allies steamroll through the defensive line, while the opponents panic seeing the group appear so fast. Watching the chaos in the courtyard, Gerard can hardly believe the speed of the assault, realizing Demian is the true force of that unit. Beside him, Apple firmly declares that the rivals won't take the flag if they stop the leader's charge. Decided to act, the boy steps forward while asking his teammate to protect the objective back at base. Watching his comrade step up to fight, Gerard mutters Apple's name, realizing he has to trust everything to him now. Facing his opponent's approach, Demian recognizes that this is the final showdown of the battle. Before him stands the future great general, Apple van Striol, radiating an impressive aura of mana. With a swift movement, Apple lunges forward, wielding his weapon against his young rival. Seeing the charge approach, the boy concludes this is the perfect opportunity to test his skills against an opponent of that level. Dodging nimbly close to the ground, Demian realizes his rival's first move was nothing more than a feint. Smiling at the maneuver, the young man notes that the opponent's real attack follows immediately, fueled by devastating energy. In an instant, the violent clash of the two spears echoes across the courtyard as their energies collide. Eyes widening in surprise, Apple realizes the boy blocked his strike in midair with absolute firmness. Stepping back on the terrain, the young warrior resets his stance, never taking his eyes off his opponent. Channeling his own mana through the shaft of his weapon, Demian tells his rival to give it his all in this fight. In a crushing leap, the boy charges forward, declaring he will use all his strength to defeat him. Pressed by the speed of the blow, Apple tries to use his spear to hold off the incoming strike. With a swift, precise strike, Demian delivers a devastating blow against his rival's defense. Eyes widening in shock, his opponent tries to brace for impact as he feels his weapon crack under the pressure. Facing that overwhelming power, Apple realizes with horror that Demian's energy is strong enough to shatter his spear in half. Faced with such strength, Appel wonders if the boy really isn't a commoner, and if he shares a similar background to his own. Observing his opponent's technique, he wonders how someone can control mana with such immense skill. Staring at that intimidating presence, the youth feels as if he's standing before a massive wall right in the middle of the training ground. Walking forward with firm steps, Demian warns Apple that it's time to end this battle. Launching a decisive strike, the boy states that his rival won't be able to block this attack. With the force of the impact, the opponent's weapon shatters, and the strike slams him violently to the ground. Rolling across the training courtyard, the warrior falls defeated after the clash. Letting out a groan of pain, the boy tries to absorb the impact of the fall onto the dirt. Without losing a second, Demian sprints at top speed toward the enemy base. Lying on the ground, Apple bitterly regrets realizing his team's flag is about to be taken. At the top of the pole, the flag sways in the wind, awaiting the end of the match. Raising the flag high, Demian celebrates the first platoon's victory amidst the cheering shouts of everyone. Still on the ground, Apple quietly watches the outcome of the match in silence. Holding the captured objective, Demian calmly walks back toward his opponent. Extending a hand to his classmate, Demian praises the good fight and listens as Apple congratulates him, promising he won't lose their next clash. In response, Demian playfully suggests they fight on the same side next time, commenting that beating him a second time would be a tough task. At those words, Apple simply offers a faint smile, looking at the boy with respect. Giving his comrade a gentle shove, the youth tells Demian to stop exaggerating, while silently acknowledging that surpassing this rival will make him even stronger. Putting his worries aside, the boy decides to simply enjoy this moment of celebration alongside his entire team. Watching the festivities in the courtyard from afar, the officer in charge notes that the tournament ended with the first platoon's victory and promises to strictly manage the rest of their training. Hearing the report, Maris agrees with his subordinate, stating that for now they should just wait and see. As the group tosses Demian into the air in pure celebration, the commander concludes with a smile that it's best to let them enjoy this sweet victory. Staring at the feast spread across the table, the recruit is stunned and asks in disbelief if this is actually real. Then, the soldiers celebrate getting to eat meat at the training center, agreeing that winning the competition was totally worth it. Watching his comrades celebrate, Demian realizes their excitement makes sense, since it's the first time in a long while they've had a proper meal. Thinking back to their visitor, the boy silently regrets that his former master left before they could talk a bit more. Just then, the instructor approaches the table and asks if he can join them, and one of the recruits eagerly invites him to sit down. Settling in beside him, the man asks Demian if he still hasn't changed his mind about the recruitment offer, receiving a firm confirmation from the youth. Hearing his answer, the superior sighs at the decision, remarking that it would have been an incredible opportunity for his career. Changing the subject, the instructor asks the young man if he's heard the latest news. He then reveals that the exact same offer was made to Apple, wondering what choice his friend ended up making. Calmly, Demian replies that he respects whatever decision was made, since his comrade's life belongs to him alone. Letting out a warm chuckle at the boy's maturity, the instructor laughs and calls him a surprisingly dull kid. As the young man keeps eating, the man admits he came to try and persuade him again, but realizes nothing will change his mind. With that, the superior raises his glass and congratulates everyone on their hard work over the past 2 weeks. Wishing them all success on their journeys, he announces that training resumes tomorrow and encourages everyone to chase their goals. Raising their glasses together to mark the occasion, the soldiers enthusiastically toast to the glory of the kingdom. Time flies, and the third and final week of training officially begins in the courtyard. During the drills, the instructor shouts at everyone to strike faster and harder. Watching the effort around him, Demian reflects on how much the recruits' attitudes have changed across the training center. He concludes that the recent competition between units served as great motivation for everyone to improve. Shortly after, an order echoes across the field, announcing a brief 5-minute break. Taking advantage of the pause, Kyle approaches Demian and asks if he's heard the latest news. He reveals that the atmosphere in the 4th squad collapsed after the tournament, and many recruits are being dismissed. With a scoffing laugh, Kyle adds that their former representative ran off as soon as the competition ended. Ignoring the mockery, Demian reminds his friend that this isn't the most important thing right now. He explains that despite their high group score from the victory, everyone still needs good individual grades to get into their desired unit. Demian highlights that the ultimate dream for commoner soldiers is joining the palace administration, though very few secure those spots. Hearing about the intense competition, the recruits swallow hard, feeling anxious. Smirking, Kyle comments that the rivalry must be fierce, since almost everyone enlisted for that very reason. Suddenly startled, Kyle grabs Demian by the shoulders and asks in alarm if he also plans to compete for that role. Unfazed, Demian assures him he isn't going to the palace, leaving Kyle confused since his top scores would easily allow it. Clutching his shoulders, Kyle asks if he really wants to become an administrative soldier just to be trapped in the palace all day. He admits the place might be suffocating, but asks if they shouldn't still aim for it since it's the best option. Dismissing the idea, Demian replies that someone like him would run away in a month, unable to stand being cooped up when he loves moving around. Curious, Kyle asks where he actually plans to go, and Demian prepares to answer. Firmly, Demian reveals he's joining the Neo-Calit's unit, catching everyone around them off guard. Shocked by the news, Kyle shouts, asking if he means that dangerous division, and yells to the other recruits that Demian has lost his mind. To shut him up, Demian kicks him in the leg, making the giant groan in pain. Despite the sting, Kyle laughs, saying he knew it all along, while Demian asks what he's talking about. Laughing out loud, Kyle calls him completely crazy and admits that's precisely why he likes him. As the order ending the break rings out, the group returns to training, celebrating the reduced competition for the palace positions. Days later, the soldiers line up in the courtyard as the commander commends them for their hard work over the past month. Standing at attention, Demian reflects on how quickly graduation arrived, feeling like they only enlisted a few days ago. From the stage, the officer wishes them well, and encourages them to keep serving the kingdom with dedication. Right after, the instructor approaches the formation and calls for Demian directly. Answering the call to attention, Demian and his comrades give their final salute, shouting together for the glory of the kingdom. The instructor then declares the graduation ceremony over and announces he will call forward the top 5 recruits. As the soldiers wait nervously, the officer begins announcing the first-place recruit. With the announcement, the instructor congratulates Demian, leader of the 1st squad, as the top graduate. Shortly after, he calls Apple from the 3rd squad to join the top rankings. Next, Kyle, Gerard, and Alex are called to complete the group of the top 5 recruits. Ordering the 5 to follow him, the instructor announces that as a reward, each may select an item from the storeroom. Standing before the large vault doors, the officer explains they can pick any item and calls Demian to enter first. Stepping through the door, Demian thinks with a smile that this long-awaited moment has finally come. Looking around, he quietly notes how well-organized the armory is. Picking up a vial from a shelf, he wonders if these are potions and if there might be other hidden treasures. Concluding there's nothing beyond what he expected, he decides to get what he needs and leave. Walking forward with firm steps, Demian reflects that the item is just as he heard, having caught his attention from the start. Reaching out to the shelf, he smiles as he finally finds the ring he was looking for. He recalls his former subordinate telling him about this artifact, capable of granting temporary invisibility when channeled with mana. Pocketing the item, Demian considers that the other recruits won't even notice it's gone, on, as none of them can use mana. Next, the instructor calls Apple to pick his reward, and the youth responds promptly as he steps inside. Watching him, Demian wonders if Apple was the one who took the ring in his past life, given his ability to sense its energy. Curious, he decides to wait outside to see what treasure his companion will choose. A moment later, Apple emerges from the storehouse much faster than expected. Looking closely, Demian's eyes widen in sheer surprise when he sees what Apple is holding. Approaching with concern, Kyle asks what happened, but Demian brushes it off, saying it's nothing. In silence, Demian reflects that there's no doubt about the true identity of the seal Apple brought out. Examining it, he recalls that the piece bears the crest of an ancient destroyed kingdom, finally realizing how Apple learned to use mana. Faced with this discovery, Demian wonders if Apple holds a secret connection to that fallen royalty. Standing before the courtyard's grand gate, the instructor asks the recruits if everyone made sure to bring an item from the armory. Curious about the chosen object, the man asks Apple if he knows what it is, and the boy replies that he picked it because he felt divine power coming from it. Smiling at the answer, the superior agrees, explaining that it makes sense since it's a seal imbued with the power to ward off bad luck. Next, the instructor praises the other recruits for choosing a decent spear and a shield crafted by a famous master artisan. Turning to Demian, the man asks, puzzled, if he's sure he wants to keep that ring. The superior explains that it's just a ring that slightly reduces weight, making the boy question the actual effect. Asking if the young man picked it without knowing, the instructor tells him to put it on his finger to test it out. Moving at high speed around the area, Demian notices his weight has dropped drastically and realizes he'll move much faster on the battlefield. After the test, the instructor asks how it felt, and the youth replies that the effect is way better than he imagined. Looking at his hand, Demian concludes with a smile that the combination of invisibility and weight reduction confirms it's an A-class artifact. Wrapping up the item check, the man orders everyone to head back, announcing it's time to apply for their desired units. Gathered in the office, the superior hands over the paper and tells Demian to fill out the form with his choice. Without hesitation, the boy grabs the quill and writes down the neocalit's unit on the document. Watching the young man's decision, the instructor silently thinks it's a shame, pondering how high Demian could soar if he joined the Order of Knights. Handing the completed sheet back to the man, Demian lets him know he's finished, and the superior confirms as he receives the document. Worried about the choice, the instructor warns that the place is extremely dangerous and tells the young man to be careful, to which the boy thanks him for his concern. The man then praises the recruit's hard work over the past month and says he can leave as soon as the transfer notice arrives in a few days. Right after saying goodbye, the youth leaves the room and closes the door behind him. As he walks down the hallway reflecting on finally heading there, Demian hears a voice calling his name. Turning around, the boy sees Apple approaching and hears his classmates say he found out about his choice from the instructor. Upset, his companion asks why he didn't join the Order of Knights when he has skill to spare, but the youth replies that it's just not where he belongs. Then, Apple reveals that he'll be joining the Order of Knights himself after receiving a recommendation letter from instructor Leon Hark. Patting his classmate's shoulder, Demian praises the decision, reassuring his friend that he'll do great there. Amused by the response, Apple chuckles that the boy is unpredictable for calling a choice wise when he turned it down himself. Taking a serious tone, the recruit ponders the danger of the neocalit's unit and tells his friend to be careful out there. With a firm handshake, Apple assures him that they will definitely cross paths again in the future. With a smile, the boy simply thanks his comrade for the vote of confidence. As he watches his friend walk away down the hallway, Demian wonders if the guy has any idea he's destined to become a great general. He realizes his ally might grow into an even bigger monster this time around, and admits he's eager to see him grow. Turning to head his own way, Demian figures he should say goodbye to the other recruits before leaving. Entering the dormitory, the boy sees his comrades gathered around the room. Right on cue, Kyle rushes toward him, enthusiastically shouting his name. Giving him a warm embrace, his friend admits he thought he'd leave without saying goodbye, but the young man assures him he'd never do that without knowing when they'd see each other again. With a smirk, his ally claims they'll meet again much sooner than Demian thinks. Kyle then calls for everyone's attention so they can hear the final words of their temporary leader. Addressing the squad, the boy thanks everyone for their hard work and encourages them to give their all in their future units. The soldiers erupt in cheers, wishing Demian good luck as they give him a hearty send-off. Later, the young man calmly walks away from the training center, carrying his luggage behind him. Suddenly, a respectful voice calls out his name, stopping him in his tracks. Looking back, intrigued, Demian tries to figure out who would be calling him at this hour. Turning around, he finds Deal greeting him warmly, formally introducing herself as a representative of the Merchant Guild. In a private room, the young woman presents a report detailing how all the investment money will be used. Continuing her explanation, she notes that the terms of the deal allocate 3% of the profits to Demian. Examining the paperwork closely, the boy is impressed by the flawless financial organization prepared by the merchant. When asked if he has any questions, he assures Deal that with such a clear explanation, there's nothing to question. Demian decides to move forward with the deal, mentioning that an employee will bring his insurance money shortly. When she mentions formalizing the contract details, the boy waves it off, dismissing the need for extra formalities. Smiling with confidence, Demian explains that contracts are only needed for disputes, adding that he fully trusts her management. Impressed by such a display of trust, Deal remarks on how truly unique he is. Placing the box on the table, Demian hands over the promised investment funds for her to inspect. Opening the chest, Deal's eyes widen in absolute shock as she gasps his name. Noticing the amount exceeds 500 gold coins instead of the promised 300, she hears Demian explain that it's a reward for her honesty. At this, Deal suggests adjusting the amount in the contract, but the boy immediately replies that there's no need. Demian adds that she could have easily brushed him off because of his age, yet she prepared documents fit for a true investor. Changing the subject, DL notes that he has completed his training and asks which unit he'll be assigned to. Calmly, Demian replies that he's heading west after volunteering for the Neocalit's unit near the Bronzel Forest. Stunned by the revelation, DL asks if he really volunteered, prompting the young man to sarcastically ask if the top recruit would ever be forced to go there. With a playful smirk, Demian jokes that if he dies, the funds will simply belong to the guild anyway. Instantly turning serious, DL tells him not to say such things, warning him that she doesn't appreciate jokes like that. Taken aback by her sharp reaction, Demian silently realizes she's quite sharp and serious when it counts. Deal then asks when he plans to leave, and Demian answers that his journey starts in 3 days. Understanding the timeline, the merchant promises to put his investment funds to good use. Watching her leave with a respectful bow, the young man reflects that the investment matter is finally settled. Rising from his chair, Demian realizes he'll soon be stuck in that dreadful forest and wonders if he should eat as much as he can before then. With that, the boy heads to a bustling tavern to celebrate, raising a mug in a cheer. He then enjoys himself in the city streets, savoring various meat skewers. After making the most of his time, the young man peacefully drifts off to sleep on a stone bench. 3 days later, Demian walks through the forest with his map in hand, checking if it's time to set off. Checking his luggage, he figures he has everything he needs and that all that's left is to hit the road. Suddenly hearing footsteps approaching, the boy turns around, puzzled by what's going on. Spotting the giant figure, Demian asks what he's doing there, while Kyle bursts into loud laughter, reminding him he said they'd meet soon. Suspicious of the situation, the boy begins to wonder if his friend really did what he thinks, while the other simply says his name. Grasping his shoulder firmly, Kyle asks if he really thought their bond would end at the training center. Sliding an arm around Demian, his ally reveals he also signed up for the Neocalit's unit and suggests they both give it their all there too. With everything ready, the giant suggests they finally set off on their journey. Suddenly, a shout telling them to wait startles Kyle, who stops and asks what's going on. Relieved to catch up, Diel chuckles and says she's glad she didn't arrive too late. Surprised to see her, Demian asks what she's doing there and what the carriage beside her is for. With a gentle smile, Deal explains she prepared the carriage for their trip, knowing the unit is far away. As Demian questions such generosity, she adds that she stocked the vehicle with supplies and non-perishable food. Gently pointing to it, Deal says it's just a small token of appreciation for the honesty Demian showed the guild. Placing a hand on her chest, she stresses that the organization always pays its debts, which is why she spent the last few days preparing everything. Hearing her tell him to take care, Kyle remarks on how generous she is. A bit sheepishly, DL admits it's also an investment, keeping in mind the future funding he promised. Bursting into laughter at her excuse, Demian jokes that she's a terrible liar and silently thinks about how interesting she is. Saying goodbye to hit the road, the boy waves and promises to see her soon, while DL waves back. Wasting no time, the young man steps up onto the carriage to get inside. Right after, the carriage speeds down the road as the merchant watches them leave from afar. Cruising down the dirt road, the vehicle moves toward their distant destination in the mountains. Complaining about the bumpy road, Kyle admits that walking all this way would have left them completely exhausted. Spolting the garrison through the window, Demian realizes they've reached her call and wonders where the locals are. Leaning back in his seat, the young man figures the population either fled because of the monsters or is in the Bronzel Forest. In fact, most of the region's inhabitants make a living harvesting a medicinal herb called a mancho in those woods. Even though the plant is poisonous and causes high fevers, It becomes a powerful painkiller once refined. Since most of the kingdom's supply comes from there, the locals can't abandon the area despite the constant danger. Stepping out of the vehicle, Demian suggests picking up the pace toward the unit, and his companion agrees right away. Walking through the silent, deserted streets of the town, the pair heads toward the military headquarters. Noticing the structure ahead, Kyle calls out to the young man and asks if that rundown place is really the building they're looking for. Before them stands an ancient, weathered fortress shrouded in dense fog. Looking at the crumbling structure, the giant wonders if anyone can actually live in a place on the verge of collapsing. Sensing movement around them, Demian warns his ally that someone is approaching. At that moment, a group of figures emerges, walking slowly through the mist. As they draw closer, a band of soldiers covered in blood and battle scars is revealed, advancing in silence. On the armor of the warrior in front, the official crest of the Neo-Calit's unit stands out clearly. Watching the veterans march, the pair notices one of the men supporting his injured companion along the way. Then, the exhausted group slowly vanishes through the dark gate of the fortress, shrouded in fog. Impressed by the scene, Kyle fearfully comments on how everyone looks like ghosts and lets out a long sigh. Seeing the giant's shock, Demian tells him to get used to it, explaining that this is a place where people fight for their lives every single day. Closing his eyes for a moment, the young man reflects that he doesn't know why he's remembering that specific moment from his past life. In that memory, he appears asking his former subordinates what a soldier's most important duty is. Faced with the question, the recruits enthusiastically reply about obeying orders, crushing the enemy, and taking dozens of foes down with them in death. Hearing those answers, the commander simply closes his eyes in absolute silence. At the same instant, he smacks the head of a soldier who complains, asking why only he was hit. Looking at the subordinate, Demian fires back, stating that his answer was the absolute worst, and declares that their true duty is to not die. Gazing sternly at the group, the leader orders them never to treat their lives lightly, and tells everyone to survive and return. Continuing his speech, he emphasizes that they all need to get stronger precisely to avoid death, and asks if they understood the message. Back in the present, Demian ponders that he still remembers each of their faces listening to his words, even though in the end, every single one of them died. Shrugging off the memories, the young man tells his companion that they're heading inside right now, leaving his ally caught off guard. Looking back, Demian reminds his friend that they came here to get stronger, and asserts that hesitating is just a waste of time. Terrified by the men's condition, Kyle calls out to Demian and suggests they wait a bit before entering, as the atmosphere there seems awful. Ignoring the warning, the boy continues walking with firm steps toward the fortress gate. Annoyed by his friend's stubbornness, Kyle curses aloud and runs after the young man, asking him to wait. As they enter the garrison, they hear a furious soldier swearing and slamming his equipment onto the ground. Shouting, the warrior complains that they were told there were only a few orcs, but they actually faced over 30, including a mage. Next, the man warns that Charleston's arm is about to fall off, and says his comrade will be forcibly discharged if he isn't treated immediately. That is the harsh reality of that unit, where a discharge from military service isn't an option for those sent there as disciplinary punishment. After all, the members of that squad are forced to choose between rotting forever in a dark cell or fighting desperately in that hell. Thus, all that's left for the soldiers is to risk their lives in combat until they are completely consumed by the local deadly battles. Outraged by the situation, the warrior rants, questioning how his comrade could possibly survive if he were discharged with such a severe wound. Stepping into the room, Commander Terran orders someone to call a doctor immediately and request the presence of a temple priest. Questioning the order, the subordinate talks back, asking if he has any idea how much a priest costs, asserting that their pay won't cover even a fraction of the price. Without hesitating, Terran hands over a pouch with 20 gold coins and tells them to use the full amount directly for the injured man's treatment. Astonished by the gesture, the soldier asks if that money wasn't meant for his superior's mother's surgery, but Terran calmly replies that her condition has improved. Faced with that demonstration of generosity from the commander, the men in the room look at each other in surprise, not knowing how to react. Moved by the commander's gesture, other soldiers begin offering their own coins to help treat their comrade. Seeing even the youngest recruit hesitate as he hands over his coins, one of the veterans calls out to him immediately. In a scolding tone, the man warns him that since he's the youngest in the group, he should use that money to replace his old boots. Looking down, the boy insists on being allowed to help, claiming the corporal ended up getting hurt because of him. Touched by the young man's attitude, the veteran praises him while Terran instructs them to hurry and call a priest for the rescue. As one of the men rushes out to fulfill the order, Taryn turns around and asks Dianel how old he currently is. The boy promptly replies that he is 18, making Taryn recall that a whole year has already passed since the youngest member's arrival. While the commander ponders that everything will depend on the injured man's endurance, another soldier appears at the door calling for him. Out of breath, the man warns that the new recruits mentioned earlier have just arrived at the location. Hearing the announcement of the rookie's arrival, the veterans in the room react with surprise and turn around with heavy glances. In silence, Taryn admits he had completely forgotten about the recruit's enlistment due to the chaos of combat. Calling for Dianel again, the commander gets an immediate response from the young soldier. Resting his arm over the boy's shoulders, Taryn invites him to go down to the reception together. Side by side with the youngest recruit, Taryn states with a smile that they are going to meet their successors. Tidying the papers on his desk, Taryn asks the newcomers if they are the unit's new recruits, receiving an immediate confirmation. Observing Kyle closely, the commander assesses that the giant seems quite useful due to his size and raw strength. Next, the man shifts his gaze to the boy beside him and notices an unexpected detail about him. Astonished by the military record, Taryn questions if the kid is really only 13 years old, and Demian promptly confirms it. Analyzing the boy, the superior thinks he is even smaller than Dianel was, and wonders why a child would come to a place like this. Resting his hand on his chin, Taryn remarks that he really can't understand what goes through the minds of young people these days. Intervening in the conversation, Kyle points to his companion and reveals that Demian ranked first at the training center. Maintaining a firm stance, the commander fires back, questioning the value of that and stating that training has nothing to do with the reality of this place. Unfazed, Demian replies that he is well aware of the difference, leaving Taryn intrigued that he came anyway despite knowing the danger. Deciding to wrap up the conversation, the superior calls for Dianel, who answers the summons immediately. With that, Taryn orders the young man to take the pair to the barracks and assign them beds to rest. Obeying the command, Dianel turns to the recruits and tells them to follow him down the hallway. Right after, Demian and his giant companion quietly follow the veteran through the building's interior. As he walks ahead, Dianel explains that there are no ranks in the Neo-Calit's unit and reveals that the man from earlier was the captain. Stopping in front of the room's door, the warrior adds that below command, the hierarchy is defined purely by how long you manage to survive here. Pointing to the cots in the room, Dianel tells them they can pick any bed, but adds that they won't be using them for long anyway. At that remark, the giant demands to know what the veteran meant by that statement. With his back to the pair, Dianel reveals he's been there for a year and is still the unit's rookie, asking if they understand what that means. Without warning, the veteran lands a heavy kick against Kyle's legs. Feeling the painful impact, his companion collapses onto the floor, curled up and begging him to stop. Staring down at the fallen rookie, the veteran lets out a soft sigh. In an intimidating tone, Dianel explains it means that every single recruit who arrived after him ended up dead. Faced with that revelation, Demian simply listens to it all in silence, maintaining his calm demeanor. On his way out, Dianel orders them to unpack their bags and clean the quarters, before he returns to explain the rest. As soon as the door closes, the two recruits are left alone inside the room. Rubbing his injured leg, Kyle complains about the veteran's attitude, while the boy beside him chuckles softly. Finding his partner's reaction strange, Kyle asks why Demian came to this place, only to hear that there was no special reason. With a peaceful smile, the young boy comments that he feels like nothing has really changed compared to the past. Grabbing a cleaning cloth, Demian calls Kyle to start cleaning up, making the giant ask in surprise if he's actually serious. Adjusting the rag in his hand, the boy answers that he is, reasoning that if they're going to do the task, they might as well do it right. With a smile on his face, the boy holds out the cloth and reminds him that this is the very first task they've received in the unit. Grabbing the fabric furiously, Kyle snaps, asking if he looks like a janitor to be doing something like that. Meanwhile, at the garrison's supply shop, Dianel sits thoughtfully on a bench, waiting. With his eyes closed, the veteran silently reflects that this whole situation actually terrifies him. He recalls that whenever new comrades arrive and start getting close, a feeling of dread naturally takes over. He remembers mentoring a rookie on his first mission, telling the kid to just watch him closely and keep up. But during a moment of distraction in battle, Dianel watched tragedy unfold right before his eyes. After all, in a dangerous place like that, a single second of carelessness could cost anyone their life. The veteran reflects that the Neo-Calit's unit is truly cruel, mercilessly devouring the lives of its soldiers. With a sigh, he admits to himself that at some point, he even stopped memorizing the names of those destined to be forgotten. Yet, Dianel quietly realizes he can't get the 13-year-old newcomer out of his head ever since they locked eyes. Recalling how the boy looked at him as if he already knew him, Dianel is interrupted by the blacksmith, who announces his spear repair is finished. Thanking him for the work, the warrior stands up to collect his weapon from the counter. The The shopkeeper then asks if the kid spotted earlier was a new recruit, and Dianel asks if he noticed him too. Looking at his customer, the man comments that he thought the boy was just a clueless rookie from the garrison, but realized he's actually Dianel's new subordinate. With a slight bow, Dianel tells the shopkeeper he'll be back later. On his walk back, the veteran thinks about the rookie, deciding he'll push him hard once the mission is over. Standing outside the barracks, Dianel considers that going too hard on him might ruin his own standing with the unit. Peeking inside the room, he suspects the recruits might have even botched cleaning the place up. In that instant, his eyes widen in total shock at the sight before him. Noticing him at the door, Demian greets the veteran, pointing out with a smile that he's already back. Standing in the spotless, gleaming room, the boy salutes and formally addresses Dianel. Seeing the pristine room, Dianel hears the surrounding veterans praising the impressive job the pair did. Asked how hard he had pushed the rookies, he stammers out that he actually barely did anything. Holding a bucket, Demian explains they hadn't even received official orders to clean yet, asking the veteran to check if anything was missed. Staring at the sparkling room, Dianel wonders why it's so clean, when most recruits barely even wipe down a surface. Unable to believe such extreme attention to detail, he wonders if this is some kind of quiet provocation from the boy. Hearing a laugh from the entrance, the veteran turns in surprise to see who's approaching. Letting out a loud laugh, Taryn praises the results, commenting that the barracks look brand new. Taking in the scene, the surrounding soldiers are stunned, wondering how a man who never shows emotion could be smiling like that. Taryn then orders the two recruits to step forward. Surprised by the view, the captain asks if they really cleaned it all by themselves, getting an immediate confirmation. Curious about their dedication, Taryn asks why they cleaned so thoroughly when they could have just slacked off and fake cleaned it. Without hesitation, Demian replies that he was simply following Dianel's orders, emphasizing that a veteran's instructions are absolute. Seeing that attitude, Taryn reflects quietly that a lifetime near death has taught him to gauge a soldier's worth at a single glance. Looking at Kyle, the captain assesses that the giant could hit the front lines with a bit more training, but he shifts his focus to the smaller boy. Staring at Demian, Taryn wonders why the top graduate from the training center would come suffer here instead of taking an easier path. Setting his doubts aside, the leader decides not to pry into the boy's motives and calls for everyone's attention. Taryn then approaches the pair in front of the veterans, throwing his arms around the recruit's shoulders in the middle of the room. With a smile on his face, the commander declares that the two now belong to the unit, ordering the team to take good care of them. Satisfied with joining the unit, Demian gives a faint smile while Kyle excitedly celebrates beside him. In a memory of the past, a soldier lying in bed asks Demian when he thinks this war will end, or if it will ever end at all. Hearing the question, Demian calmly replies that the conflict will only come to an end if they decide to surrender. Right after, his comrade closes his eyes and demands that the boy doesn't die before him under any circumstances. Finding the sudden conversation strange, the young man asks if his friend ate something bad, but the other insists they make that promise. Back in the present, Demian reflects in bed that he never actually answered, but in a way, he kept that promise. Moments later, the boy remembers the tragic moment he saw his former comrade fall lifeless on the battlefield. Overcome by a dark determination, the young man charged forward furiously to keep fighting in that war. Striking enemies in mid-air with his spear, Demian concludes that, in the end, he ended up surviving longer than his friend. Opening his eyes in the dark barracks, the young man quietly curses himself for remembering that moment. Realizing he won't be able to sleep anymore after that, Demian decides to get up to practice his mana cultivation. Walking silently through the forest at night, the young man moves through the vicinity of the fortress. Hearing a noise coming from among the trees, the boy wonders who could be training at this hour. Approaching carefully, Demian notices that the figure wielding a weapon there is the veteran Dianel. Watching the warrior's movements, the young man thinks he was already obsessed with training back then, but notices a strange detail. Seeing Dianel exhausted and leaning on his giant blade, Demian wonders why he uses a heavy sword that hinders his greatest asset, speed. Considering that in his past life it took a long time for the warrior to switch weapons, the boy concludes he would get punched if he tried to interfere now. Stepping away quietly, Demian decides not to ruin the good impression he made and prefers to wait for the right moment to bring it up. The next day, before the mountainous landscape, the veterans complain among themselves about the grueling endurance training ahead. While waiting for the captain to arrive, one of the soldiers suggests making a bet on whether the rookies can handle the routine until the end. Excited by the idea, the veterans bet their silver coins, confident the pair won't even survive the morning activities. Overhearing the comments from afar, Kyle gets furious upon realizing they're betting against his abilities and questions their contempt. Observing the scene around him, Demian reflects that no one tries to stop the gambling. noting how disorganized the unit's atmosphere is. Deciding to step in, the boy starts walking toward the group while his companion asks where he's going. Approaching the veterans calmly, Demian asks if he can join the bet, saying it sounds like fun. Surprised by the rookie's arrival, the men mock him, asking if he has money to burn. Confirming his intention to join, Demian replies that he has money and proposes a slight change to the terms. Showing a gold coin in his hand, the boy bets that he will outperform everyone there during the day's training to take first place. Shocked by the audacity of the proposal, the veterans look at the boy suspiciously and ask if he wants to add any more demands. Amused by the recruit's boldness, one of the men just lets out a mocking laugh, praising the rookie's courage. The warrior accepts the challenge and guarantees the boy will take the whole pot if he manages to defeat them. Then, the men add that if he loses, he'll have to do their chores for a month, telling him to back down if he lacks the guts. Staying calm, Demian points out he's already risking a gold coin and a month of chores, asking if he can add one more condition. Casually, the young man demands a month of free time during training hours if he wins, leaving the veterans outraged by the proposal. Seeing everyone hesitate, Taran steps in and accepts the deal on the spot, catching the soldiers off guard. Right after, the captain calls out to Dianel to get the senior recruit's attention. Smirking at the situation, Taran announces that the veteran will also take part in the bet. Seeing the young man hesitate, the captain taunts him, asking if he's afraid of losing to a rookie. Irritated by the provocation, Dianel retorts that he just doesn't want to waste money on such an obvious outcome. Tossing a coin to the young man, Taran guarantees he will cover his share of the bet. Turning to Demian, the captain confirms he will get the promised free time if he outperforms the veterans in training. Watching the scene, the veterans mutter among themselves, unable to understand why such a scrawny boy was brought to the battlefield. Angered by the rookie's boldness, the men vow to crush his pride and tell the boy to give it everything he's got. Lowering his head in response, Demian silently reflects that everything is going according to plan, and that this bet is about much more than just getting free time. The young man reflects that he needs to shake up this unit consumed by despair, since living without hope destroys everyone around. Cutting off the conversations, Taran steps forward and announces the immediate start of stamina training. Pointing to a pile of logs, Taran orders everyone to run, while carrying the wood to the top of the rocky hill. Faced with the order, the veterans protest, complaining that this isn't part of their routine, and suggesting they leave the heavy lifting to the rookies. Refusing to accept their complaints, Taran barks at everyone to stop whining and grab the logs without delay. Next, the soldiers begin climbing the steep mountain, lugging the heavy wood on their shoulders. Panting from the exertion, one of the warriors tries to hold steady under the weight. Trudging forward, the man wonders why the captain suddenly changed the training. Right behind him, another veteran claims the change is because of the rookies, betting they'll give up in no time. However, as he takes a closer look around, the man finds it strange and wonders where the new recruit went. Surprised by what he sees, the warrior refuses to believe the scene before him. Looking up, the man shouts in disbelief, wondering since when Demian had managed to pull so far ahead in the lead. Casual about his ascent, the boy lets out a soft sigh while balancing the log on his shoulder. Glancing at his hand, Demian notices that the special ring also reduces the weight of anything he carries. With a smirk on his face, the youth concludes he made an excellent choice picking up that artifact. Pausing for a moment on the climb, the boy looks back and wonders where the unit's veterans are. Watching the men far behind on the slope, Demian considers that the only one capable of even coming close to him is Dianel. Looking closer, the boy sees Dianel struggling up the slope under the weight of the wood. Gasping for air, the veteran tries to keep his pace so he doesn't fall too far behind. Impressed by his determination, Demian silently acknowledges his comrade's strength, knowing he'll reach the top soon. Watching the smiling boy with the log, Taran admits he misjudged him, thinking he was just another rookie. Moments later, the young man plants his feet firmly on top of the mountain. Standing beside the log set on the ground, Demian proudly declares he took first place by a landslide. Taking in the scene, Taran stares at the boy in disbelief that he actually finished the trial first. Seeing Dianel reach the crest utterly exhausted, the captain realizes the rookie has proven far more useful than he imagined. Taran then shouts out to everyone on the hill that the training session is officially over. Suddenly, one of the veterans points frantically toward the main building and shouts for the commander. Yelling in a panic, the man tells him to look toward the fortress structure. Staring at the spot, Taran's eyes widen in shock as he sees the red flag flying. Fluttering at the top of the building, that signal alerts everyone to a maximum level emergency. Facing the emergency, Demian steps forward and tells the captain they are coming along too. However, Terran denies permission, stating that real combat is nothing like training, and orders them both to stay in the barracks. Pushing the idea, the young man suggests they serve just as porters in the rear, while Kyle adds that they both have more than enough strength to help. Closing his eyes, the commander silently laments being in such an embarrassing situation that he needs help from raw recruits. Turning his back, Terran grants permission as long as they stay out of combat, ordering them to grab spare gear and wait in the rear. Next, the captain orders Dianal to hand over the extra supplies to the pair, receiving a prompt response from the veteran. Taking the gear, Demian recalls the stories about the Bronsel forest and remembers what the veteran had told him in his past life. Back then, Dianal had revealed that a true demon inhabited that region. Although the boy thought it was an absurd tale at the time, the veteran assured him the creature was no ordinary monster. The warrior recalled witnessing with his own eyes an orc, possessed by this evil force, tear a steel wolf apart effortlessly. Clenching his fists, Dianal explained that the unit had to abandon the entire area due to the extreme danger posed by the creature. With a grim look, the veteran added that if it weren't for that threat, the unit would never have been destroyed in the future. Carrying the heavy load on his back, Demian silently curses his scrambled thoughts amid so much overwhelming information. Realizing this, the boy concludes he needs to see the situation with his own eyes, even if it's just as a porter. At the head of the troop, Terran asks if everyone grabbed their gear and receives a unanimous confirmation from the soldiers. As they march, the captain stresses that in an operation, they must consider every variable and avoid any unnecessary danger. Terran adds that the top priority is bringing everyone back alive, getting an immediate confirmation from the troop. Right after, the leader signals the start of the march while Demian silently reflects on finally setting off. With a focused gaze, the young man realizes this will be his first real battle in this new life. Upon reaching the forest, Terran orders them to scout the perimeter in groups of 3 without losing sight of one another. Then, the commander orders the rookie pair to stick close to him while exploring the area. Surveying the surroundings, Demian thinks the forbidden area looks like a regular forest, trying to understand why it's considered so dangerous. However, the boy notices that the air carries a thick, distinct smell of a real battlefield. Having spent years in battle in his past life, his instincts scream at him about the threat lurking nearby. Gripping the shaft of his spear tightly, the young man realizes this environment is dangerous on an extreme level. Suddenly, the sound of a warning whistle echoes through the trees, taking the rookies completely by surprise. Hearing the signal, Terran turns around, puzzled, wondering if the patrol team found something. Dashing toward the scouts, the captain answers the urgent calls of the soldiers ahead. Reaching the spot, the troop is met with a gruesome scene of blood and bodies scattered across the ground. Examining a dropped blade, Terran hears a subordinate find the abandoned weapons strange and deduces the victims were seized by absolute terror. Facing the completely shattered trees, Terran wonders what kind of monster could cause such devastation. When a soldier suggests the culprit might be some kind of bear, Terran shuts it down, stating no creature of that species in this forest could pull this off. Right after, the warrior asks if it could be an ogre, but the commander replies that he doesn't buy that possibility either. At that moment, Demian notices something intriguing lying on the ground just a few steps away. Approaching the spot, the boy identifies the fallen carcass of a red bear. Examining the deep marks on the animal's body, the young man tells his superior he agrees with the monster bear theory, pointing to the claw spacing. Pointing to the snapped trunk nearby, Demian adds that a beast of that size would explain the destruction around them. Impressed by the boy's sharp analysis, Terran asks where he learned to read a scene so accurately. In response, Demian lies that his father was a hunter, and he learned by listening to his stories, earning praise from the captain for his eye for detail. Hearing that explanation, Kyle stares at him, confused, and starts to ask if he hadn't said earlier that his father was a soldier. Faced with the question, the boy shoots a threatening glare at his ally to shut him up instantly. Turning back to the troop, Terran orders them to carefully gather the remains to return to the families and calls for an immediate retreat. Agreeing with the call, Demian silently realizes that pushing deeper into the territory would be suicide, since they don't know the real enemy they're up against. Because of this, the boy recognizes the captain's virtues and understands why Dianal admired the leader so much. Hurrying the soldiers along, Terran demands the troop move fast to leave the forest without wasting any time. Suddenly, Demian spins around, startled, sensing an imminent danger emerging from the trees. Sprinting forward, the young man screams for everyone to get out of the way immediately. A split second later, a colossal boulder crashes violently onto the ground, hitting the troop. Trapped under the debris, one of the men screams in pain from his crushed leg, asking where a boulder that big even came from. Seeing his comrades in agony, Demian shouts for Kyle as the giant rushes toward the boulder. Exerting all his physical strength, Kyle holds back the massive rock to keep it from crushing the wounded. Channeling his energy, Demian tells them to hurry while helping lift the boulder to rescue the soldier. Joining forces, the two lift the massive rock, creating space for the rescue. Seeing this, the other soldiers rush over, shouting for everyone to help pull their comrade from under the stone. Groaning in pain, the injured man is finally dragged out of danger by his comrades. Worried about his subordinate's grave condition, Taryn curses as Demian approaches, handing over some herbs for the man to chew. The boy explains that he needs to chew the plant as much as possible to extract the juice and ease the pain. Surprised by the suggestion, Taryn warns that the amancho plant acts as a painkiller, but cautions that consuming it without detoxifying it is extremely dangerous. Showing some mimosa seeds, Demian explains that they neutralize the toxin, emphasizing that the injured man must chew everything while he's still conscious. Watching the men chew the herbs, a bewildered Taryn wonders how that boy could possibly know all of that. Concerned about the situation, Demian warns the captain that they need to leave immediately, as that boulder didn't fall on its own and the threat is nearby. At that exact moment, the ground shakes with heavy footsteps, while the captain stammers in shock as he realizes the creature is approaching. Facing the colossal beast looming before them, one of the soldiers panics and asks what kind of monster that could be. As the beast arrives, one of the soldiers is struck violently and sent flying by the impact. Hitting the ground hard, the warrior rolls across the grass, struggling to recover from the blow. Before him, the monster looms imposing, its red eyes glowing through the dust. Raising its massive paw into the air, the creature prepares to unleash a crushing blow. In the next instant, its claws come crashing down with extreme violence, shattering the surrounding rocks. Acting fast, Taryn thrusts his sword forward, blocking the brutal strike to protect the squad. Noticing that 3 of his men are injured, the captain firmly declares that he won't let that monster leave alive. Without wasting a second, Taryn shouts orders for everyone to charge at the enemy immediately. Obeying the command, the soldiers surround their opponent, urging each other to keep striking the beast until they pierce its defense. Noticing the 2 recruits approaching, one of the veterans yells at Demian and his partner to fall back to the rear. At that exact moment, Taryn calls Dianel to the front line, and the young man promptly answers the call. With a well-aimed strike from his broadsword, the veteran slashes the creature's paw, sending its blood spraying into the air. Struck by the attack, the beast lets out a deafening roar of pain as it staggers through the brush. Taking advantage of the enemy's retreat, Taryn steadies his stance and focuses his strength into his blade. With his weapon ready for the decisive strike, the captain declares that this is finally the end of the fight. Watching the battle unfold, Demian is surprised to realize that mana is manifesting within the creature. Leaping through the air with his blade raised high, Taryn screams for the monster to die as he delivers the final blow. With a devastating strike, the attack pierces through the beast's body, slamming it lifeless onto the ground. Standing over their fallen enemy, the soldiers cheer and laugh, mocking the monster for being bested by their group. Approaching the corpse, Taryn examines the beast's body and remarks that he has no idea where such a creature could have come from. Touching the beast's hide, the captain notices strange dark spots covering its flesh. Seeing this, the soldier beside him asks if the mark could be contagious, mentioning he's seen similar spots on plague victims. Watching the scene in silence, Demian realizes those marks confirm his suspicion. Taking a step forward, the boy reflects that there is only one reason an abnormal monster like that would appear here. Staring at the carcass, Demian concludes they need to find the exact origin of this threat as soon as possible. Turning to his troops, Taryn tells them to stay sharp and orders them to skin the monster to make armor. At that moment, the boy steps in, warning that they won't be able to salvage that creature's hide. Hearing the warning, Taryn turns around in surprise, staring at the youth in silence. Approaching Demian, the captain says he is certain the boy knows something important about the situation. Given the explanation, Taryn orders them to abandon the carcass and return to base, calling the rookie to come with him. Shortly after, Taryn tells the boy to follow him immediately as they walk through the forest. Upon entering the office, the captain tells him to take a seat, receiving an immediate nod. Then, Taryn asks directly if the youth knows anything about the dark-spotted monster found in the woods. With a serious look, Demian explains that the creature appears to have been corrupted by demonic energy. Impressed by the revelation, the man asks if it's the kind of power used by black magicians, and the boy firmly confirms it. Hearing this, the commander asks if there could be black magicians in the forest, emphasizing that dark magic is strictly forbidden. Keeping his composure, Demian notes that it's too early to be sure, adding that it could be either a magician or a cursed artifact. As he reflects on the matter, The youth recalls that this power stems from demon worship, and that prolonged exposure leads to a miserable death. In silence, Demian remembers there was a mana stone infused with this power in the forest, but he is surprised to see it appear so soon. The boy considers that the existence of that stone was only supposed to come to light after the events that would shake the Empire in the future. His eyes widening, Demian wonders if this exact moment might be the true beginning of the entire calamity. Analyzing the situation, the youth concludes that this energy grows stronger over time, meaning he can destroy it before it reaches its peak. Snapping back to the conversation, the commander sighs with curiosity and asks how he knows all this, to which Demian replies he heard it from his father. Intrigued by the story, the captain asks to hear more details about this account from the past. Stating that they need any lead they can get right now, the superior orders Demian to continue his explanation. A short while later, someone complains of fatigue upon waking up, their body aching all over. In the barracks, one of the soldiers comments on how exhausting the previous mission was while telling Kyle to get up. Suddenly, a recruit bursts into the room in a hurry, telling everyone to pay attention to the news. The boy reveals that the Bronsel forest has been completely sealed off, and entry is strictly forbidden for everyone. Realizing they will spend some time without missions, just training, the soldiers celebrate the timely break to let the wounded recover. Noticing his partner's serious reaction, Kyle asks Demian if he isn't happy about the news, and the boy gives a simple answer. Silently, Demian ponders that the break came at a good time for the unit, but wonders why it's happening right now. At that exact moment, the sound of firm footsteps approaching down the hallway catches the group's attention. Watching the city guards walk through the area, the recruits wonder in surprise what those guys are doing there. Before them, the official envoy sits in silence, escorted by his men. Noticing the unexpected visit, Terran steps up and asks the real reason for their presence at the base. The envoy explains that the temple agreed to cooperate after confirming the monster's carcass emanated an evil aura. Hearing the confirmation, Terran reflects on Demian's prediction, wondering if the forest really is linked to demonic energy. Stressing that nothing is set in stone, the visitor announces they will send a priest for a joint search. Finally, the man requests to take the soldier who possesses prior knowledge of this energy on the expedition. Hesitating at the demand, Terran considers that sending an inexperienced, newly arrived recruit is risky, but the visitor counters by reminding him that it was the boy himself who uncovered the truth. Aware of the consequences, the captain silently recognizes that refusing the offer would result in severe penalties for his unit. With that, Terran turns to the subordinate beside him and calls for Aaron, who promptly answers his superior. The commander then orders the man to go fetch Demian immediately. Upon hearing the call, the salute for the glory of the kingdom echoes through the walls of the military base. As he enters the room, the boy notices the visitor's attire and wonders what the guard could be doing there. Walking past the men, the youth begins to suspect the real reason behind the summons. Approaching the young man, Terran begins to explain why they called him there. Listening to the captain's words, the boy hangs on every detail of what is being said. The man then makes it clear that he is at complete liberty to refuse the mission if he doesn't want to go. Without hesitation, Demian accepts the request, stating he will go on the mission before it's too late. Taken aback by the swift response, the commander reacts in confusion at the young man's readiness. Smiling firmly, Demian reiterates his desire to help, pointing out that their chances of finding the corrupted monster will be much higher if he goes himself. At that, Terran agrees to the plan and gives the boy permission to head back to the quarters. Offering a formal salute, the young man acknowledges the order and is told he'll be notified as soon as the schedule is set. Outside, the captain shows concern, questioning if the boy will truly be all right going alone. Even though Terran offers to send seasoned veterans along on the expedition, Demian replies that he prefers to go unaccompanied. With a grin, the young man reasons that it'll be far easier to run away on his own if something goes wrong along the way. With a stern glare, the commander warns the recruit that direct combat is strictly forbidden during this mission. Smiling with confidence, the boy tells the captain not to worry, promising to take advantage of the trip to gather plenty of medicinal herbs for the unit. Bidding farewell as he walks away, he guarantees he will return to base safe and sound. Letting out a long sigh, Terran remarks to his subordinate that this recruit is truly an extraordinary kid. Shortly after, the search team gathers in the middle of the woods to begin the expedition. At the front of the group, Captain Vassel of the Erkal Guard leads the movement through the area. Beside him, Priestess Claire from the Temple of Adelant marches along in silence. Watching the procession, Demian silently reflects that the suspicion of a dark mage has brought together quite an impressive group. Suddenly, the guard captain turns around and asks the young man if his name is really Demian. With complete composure, the boy confirms it, while the man looks taken aback by his informal tone. Without hesitating, the young man openly asks if there's any problem with that. Demian then adds that since they belong to different units, ranks mean nothing here. So to him, the captain is just an older guy. Even as the officer stammers that he is still a captain, the boy asks him not to be so stiff, promising to cooperate as much as needed. Stunned by such boldness, the man grumbles to himself, wondering what kind of lunatic this recruit is. Noticing the commotion, the priestess approaches and asks who he is. In response, the guard explains that he's a new soldier named Demian from the Neocalites unit, adding that he was the first to suspect demonic energy. Hearing this, the priestess murmurs in surprise, amazed that someone here was already familiar with demonic energy. Then, the woman slowly approaches Demian, who waits for her in silence amid the foliage. Watching her draw near, the young man notes her attire and comments that she must be a priestess. Explaining that she heard he was the first to raise suspicions, Claire asks if she may ask him a few questions, and the boy gives his approval right away. Curious, the priestess asks directly how he knew for sure that the aura around the monster was demonic energy. Under her attentive gaze, Demian remains serene as he prepares to answer. Without faltering, the young man explains he learned it from his late father, prompting Claire to ask to hear a bit more about it. Asking if she managed to examine the beast's corpse, Demian hears her confirm that she saw it alongside the high priest. Continuing his explanation, the young man states he knows most of the creatures in the Bronzel Forest, but notes that this one was entirely different. Demian adds that the creature had dark patches and acted mindlessly, which led him to deduce it was corrupted by evil. Upon hearing this explanation, the priestess asks if this knowledge also came from his father, receiving an immediate confirmation. Satisfied with what she heard, Claire bows slightly and thanks the boy for his kindness in answering. Turning to the guard captain, the woman suggests they move deeper into the territory. Following her advice, the officer barks orders for the troops to push into the woods and report immediately if they spot anything suspicious. With that, the soldiers march in formation through the thick brush, venturing deeper into the forest. As he walks, Demian scratches his head thoughtfully, analyzing the situation around them. Moving along the trail, the young man figures the search team can handle the main sweep. Scanning the dense vegetation, Demian calculates that he needs to go a bit deeper to find what he's looking for. Suddenly, the boy calls out as he spots something among the plants, instantly drawing the attention of the nearby guards. Hurrying over, the guards anxiously ask if he found something or saw a monster. With a smile, Demian celebrates finding a white root, knowing it's the best herb for boosting and restoring mana. Outraged by the scene, the guards shout furiously, asking if he made a scene over a simple herb, and if he came here just to go sightseeing. Glancing sideways at the men, the young man dismisses their complaints with contempt. Without hesitation, Demian warns them that running their mouths will get them killed early, leaving the guard fuming at the provocation. Lowering his spear, the boy shoots back that searching is their job, and he only agreed to cooperate, asking what's so wrong with picking a plant. Shouting, the man demands he stop scaring everyone, and warns him not to disrupt the progress of the mission. With a mocking smirk, Demian claims that this sheer panic shows how weak they are, adding that such behavior is an embarrassment to the guard. Faced with that provocative response, the guard trembles in shock, unable to talk back to the boy. Stepping into the argument, Vasil asserts his authority and orders them to stop fighting immediately. Turning to Demian, the captain strictly warns him that he won't tolerate impulsive behavior that could jeopardize the expedition. Closing his eyes serenely, Demian agrees and promises to move only within the designated search area. Shortly after, the guard lets out a frustrated sigh and walks away, letting the young man go on his way. Vasil then commands in a firm voice for all search team members to put their gear on the ground and begin sweeping the area. But in the very next instant, a terrifying noise erupts from the thick brush, catching the soldiers completely off guard. At that, the guards panic as a pack of monsters emerges from the bushes, shouting for everyone to brace for combat. Noticing it's just a small group of orcs, some warriors comment that it'll be easy to wipe them out quickly and move on. However, one of the soldiers widens his eyes in horror upon spotting the dark patches on the creatures' bodies and the red glow in their eyes. Terrified by the sight, the warrior screams that those orcs have been completely corrupted by demonic energy. In that exact second, one of the beasts lunges forward with a violent roar, attacking without a shred of mercy. Seeing the lethal strike coming his way, the guard hears a yell telling him to fall back immediately. Unable to react in time, the man realizes in despair that the monster's attack is far too fast to block. But before the blade can hit him, the loud clang of clashing metal rings out right in front of his face. Masterfully parrying the blow, Demian tells the soldier to get a grip and stay focused. Taking a combat stance, the boy scolds the guard, asking how much longer he plans on ruining his unit's reputation. Seeing the threat approach, Captain Vassell shouts for everyone to immediately take up battle formation. Next, the officer orders them to split into groups of 3 to hold off the orcs, directing 3 men to protect the priestess. Promptly, the assigned guards confirm the order and step in front of Claire to guarantee her safety. Observing the leadership on the field, Demian notes that the captain remains calm thanks to his extensive combat experience. Right after, direct engagement begins with a violent clash between the guards and the pack of beasts. As the battle intensifies, the young recruit turns around upon hearing a scream from the front line. Nearby, soldiers struggle to hold off an orc attempting to reach the priestess. From the furious way they charge, it is clear the beasts were provoked and are acting even more aggressively. Knowing that Claire's power acts like pure poison to them, the mob rushes madly in her direction. Facing the imminent threat, the men shout warnings as they desperately try to hold the shield wall. Focusing her strength amidst the danger, Claire joins her hands in prayer to summon her sacred energy. Watching from afar, Demian notices an intense light beginning to radiate from the girl in the forest clearing. It is the divine power used by priests, manifesting around her in a radiant glow. Hit by this purifying force, the beast staggers back, unable to withstand the impact. Taking advantage of the monster's temporary weakness, the guards push forward with their shields, shouting curses at their foes. Seeing the critical situation, the boy thinks everyone will die if nothing is done, and decides to ignore the captain's order not to join the fight. With a swift movement, the young man delivers a devastating strike to stop the beast's advance. Leaping high over the monsters, Demian realizes he has no choice but to take matters into his own hands. In the blink of an eye, the boy's blade pierces right through 2 orcs at once, making them roar in agony. Seeing this, the guard is completely stunned as the beast collapses lifeless right in front of him. While the man tries to process what just happened, Demian shouts at him to go help the others immediately. Hesitating to leave, the soldier stammers, worried about the priestess's safety. Without wasting a second, the boy yells that he'll protect her and tells the guard to move it. Hearing his firm order, the soldiers nod and instantly rush off to join the main fight. Left alone with the priestess, Demian readies his weapon and takes a stance to shield her from the surrounding creatures. Looking down, the young man asks if Claire is okay, noticing her paralyzed on the ground. In total shock, the woman only lets out a weak murmur, unable to form a single sentence. Holding her face firmly, Demian snaps at her to pull herself together, asking if she wants to get everyone killed. As Claire tearfully denies it, the boy realizes this is her first time in real combat, and that her power earlier was unleashed purely on instinct. Pointing straight toward the front lines, Demian orders the priestess to look at the battle and unleash all her divine power in that direction right now. Hearing his command, Claire nervously nods, promising she'll do as he asked. With that, the girl kneels on the grass and begins to focus her prayers. Gripping her staff tightly, the priestess cries out to the heavens for help, seeing that everyone is in grave danger. Moments later, an overwhelming wave of divine light bursts from her body, washing over the entire area. Watching the scene, Demian is stunned to realize her power rivals that of a high priest. Struck by the holy glow, the beasts howl in pain as their corrupted energy is burned away. Seeing the monsters fall back, one of the guards shouts enthusiastically that this is their chance to counterattack. Seizing the opening, the soldiers push forward together, showing no mercy to their enemies. With a fast, brutal strike, one of the creatures is decapitated in the middle of the clash. Right after, the troops' blades run through the enemies, wiping out what was left of the pack. Under the crushing force of the attack, another beast falls sliced open on the ground. Then the head of the last orc rolls across the grass, bringing the battle to an end. As silence returns to the forest, the survivors gasp for air, wondering if the danger has truly passed. Wiping the sweat from his face, Vassell orders his men to tally the dead and wounded. Upon learning that 8 men were lost, the captain orders them to carefully retrieve the bodies so everyone can return together. He then asks if they need to press deeper into the forest since demonic energy hasn't been confirmed yet, but the priestess replies that it won't be necessary. Walking calmly through the brush, the young woman approaches the body of one of the fallen creatures. Examining the beast's carcass, Claire confidently confirms that the monsters were indeed corrupted by demonic energy. Gazing up at the dense canopy, she adds that the forest is tainted and that something far worse must be brewing in its depths. Because of this, she advises that they file an official report and assemble a subjugation force right away. Overhearing the conversation, Demian smirks, realizing that a subjugation force will finally be put together. He considers that the army deployed will be massive, featuring numerous priests and with the Neo-Kalitz unit leading the front line. Just then, one of the city guards hesitantly approaches the boy to get his attention. Looking at the youth, the man sincerely thanks him for saving his life during the battle. Shortly after, the other soldiers bow respectfully to Demian, expressing their gratitude gratitude for his help in combat. Scratching the back of his neck casually, the boy tells them to forget about it, saying it was no big deal. Letting out a sigh of relief, Demian looks up at the sunny sky as the dust from the battle settles. Kneeling on the grass, the boy picks up his herb pouch, remembering how hard he worked to gather them for his squad mates. Carefully, he packs away the collected medicinal plants to make sure they stay safe. Walking forward with firm steps and spear in hand, Demian approaches Captain Vassal to let him know he's ready. Then, the boy asks Captain Vassal to go crush the herbalists in Urkal City. Surprised by the unusual request, Vassal reacts in shock and asks what the boy means by that. Demian explains that the merchants charge 5 times more for the plants, taking his entire paycheck. Handing the pouch full of herbs to the officer, the boy asks him to use them to treat the wounded soldiers. Touched by his generosity, Vassal expresses his heartfelt thanks to the boy. Immediately after, the captain barks orders for the troops to fall back, gather the fallen, and tend to the injured. Carrying his gear and spear, Demian pauses briefly as he passes by the priestess. Watching him silently, Claire offers a gentle smile from behind her veil. Returning to the office, the recruit stands before Terran to deliver his report. Paying close attention to his subordinate, the captain asks if anything notable happened during the search mission. In response, the soldier reports that the search went smoothly, but confirms the priestess verified the presence of demonic energy in the orcs. Hearing this confirmation, Terran simply nods in silent agreement at the gravity of the situation. The subordinate then places a small box on the desk, explaining that the captain of the guard asked for it to be delivered. Picking up the small object, Demian asks what it is, but Terran admits he doesn't know what's inside either. The commander adds that the officer sent his thanks, along with news of a major crackdown on herbalists to cut plant prices in half. Hearing this, Demian merely hums with a subtle, satisfied smile. Pleased with the conversation, Terran dismisses the boy so he can return to his duties. Alone in the room, the captain rests his chin on his hand, reflecting on the boy's behavior. Shortly after, another officer remarks that the recruit is far from ordinary, prompting Terran to ask what he means by that. Faced with the question, the man reveals with awe that the boy can manipulate mana. Learning this, Terran thinks about how the kid could have gotten rich selling those plants at market price. The commander recalls the moment Demian handed over the bag full of herbs, asking for them to be used on his injured comrades. With a faint smile, Terran concludes that, in any case, the boy is definitely no ordinary person. Walking down the hallway with the box in hand, Demian wonders what could be inside, hoping it might be a ring-shaped artifact. The young man then opens the small container to check its contents. Looking inside the box, the boy is surprised to find a mana-strengthening elixir. Wondering where the captain of the guard could have gotten something so valuable, Demian happily clutches the gift and decides he'll put the potion to good use. At that exact moment, Kyle sneaks up from behind, asking if something good just happened to his friend. Startled by the sudden approach, the young man throws a direct punch right into the giant's stomach. Feeling the force of the blow, Kyle complains about the scare and asks what the boy just hid inside his coat. Casually brushing it off, Demian replies, "It's just medicine for internal injuries given by the captain," catching his friend off guard by changing the subject to the battle. As they walk down the hallway together, the giant regrets not going along, but the boy reassures him that there will be plenty of fights coming up soon. They then open the door to the barracks and step into a room packed with veterans. As soon as they cross the threshold, the soldiers excitedly swarm them, asking if it's true that Demian gathered a ton of herbs in the forest. Patting his head and pinching his cheeks, the veterans burst out laughing, praising how clever the kid is. Modestly smiling, he explains that town plants were way too expensive, so he gathered some himself with his unit comrades in mind. Just then, Terran enters the room clapping his hands, calling for everyone's attention to address the recent rumors. Addressing the gathered group, the commander officially announces that a subjugation force will be formed for the Bronsel Forest later this month. Terran then adds that, aside from morning drills, everyone will have free time, advising the group to use this period wisely. Hyped up by the news, one of the veterans asks the boy what he plans to do with his very first day off. As the soldiers celebrate, Dianel quietly steps away and walks alone toward the barracks exit. Noticing him leave, one of his comrades asks where he's going, only to hear him reply that he's going to train by himself for a while. Before stepping out the door, the veteran glances back sideways at Demian. Watching his squad mate leave, the soldier smirks, commenting that the guy thinks about nothing other than training. Out in the courtyard, Dianel's great sword slams into the ground as his training comes to an end. Panting heavily and resting his hands on his knees, he laments his lack of progress, despite devoting all his time to practice. Recalling their last battle against the beast, Dianel remembers hitting his wall, having managed to land only a single blow on the monster. Clutching his chest in anguish, the warrior realizes he won't be able to move forward if he keeps going like this. Suddenly, the sound of rapid footsteps catches Dianel's attention as he spots the recruit running toward the forest. Following the boy with his eyes, he wonders if the kid is heading back to that same spot again. Watching from a distance, Dianel notices that Demian has been sneaking off to these woods almost every day since he arrived. Then, Dianel recalls the soldiers praising the boy for saving everyone's lives in combat, and wonders if the kid hides a secret. Deciding he has nothing to lose, Dianel marches firmly toward Demian's training spot, sword in hand. Sitting on the grass deep in the forest, the boy rests his spear beside him to begin his session. Taking the small box from his coat, Demian decides it's finally time to consume the potion. He downs the vial in one go, swallowing every last drop of the precious liquid. As energy begins coursing through his body, Demian is stunned to find the elixir holds far more condensed mana than he imagined. Closing his eyes with determination, the boy tells himself to focus, so he doesn't waste such a rare opportunity. Gathering all his cultivation, the youth strives to absorb every drop of that power without letting any slip away. As time passes, the darkness of night completely shrouds the canopy of the surrounding trees. Opening his exhausted eyes as he notices the sun setting, Demian asks himself in surprise just how many hours he spent meditating there. Pressing his side, the boy realizes the absorption is slow due to his small core, concluding he urgently needs to expand it. Right at that moment, a sudden voice calls out to Demian, catching the boy completely off guard. Looking up, the young man hears Dianel ask why he's been meditating in a place like this for so long. Annoyed by his own carelessness, Demian silently curses himself for being so focused that he failed to sense anyone approaching. When asked how he found him, Demian hears the veteran reply that it would be impossible not to know, considering the boy slipped away every single night. Dianel then mentions hearing that the kid single-handedly defeated several corrupted orcs during the patrol mission. Resting his hand on the hilt of his greatsword, the veteran addresses Demian in a serious tone before continuing. Dianel then asks if the boy would fight him using his full strength. Surprised by the request, Demian reminds him that combat between members of the same unit is strictly forbidden. However, looking into the veteran's eyes, the boy realizes he is dead serious. Studying the warrior, Demian finds he can understand exactly how the man feels just by looking at him. Getting straight to the point, the boy asks when Dianel first realized he had hit a wall in his training. Taken aback by the question, the veteran asks what on earth the kid is talking about. Holding his ground, Demian repeats the question, wanting to know how long he has felt stuck. Faced with such a direct question, Dianel hesitates for a moment, unable to answer. Giving in to the moment, the veteran confesses it's been about 3 months since his skills stopped improving, as if they were blocked. Nodding in agreement, the boy replies that he understands that feeling all too well. Demian adds that he also knows what happens to those who don't receive proper guidance at such a crucial moment. Concerned about the rules, Dianel warns that the others won't let it slide if they get caught fighting, but suggests they just make sure nobody finds out. Taking his stance with his spear, Demian warns the veteran that he might end up seriously hurt. Lifting his heavy sword, Dianel states that's exactly what he wants, warning that he won't go easy on him. An instant later, the violent clash of their weapons echoes through the forest, kicking off the duel. Reaching out toward his opponent, Demian agrees to the duel and tells the veteran to bring everything he's got. As they walk through the fortress, the subordinate praises the captain for the meeting and notes that the subjugation mission looks like it's going to be quite tough. In response, Terran states that they have to pull it off either way, since a good outcome will greatly benefit the unit. The warrior agrees with his superior, but cuts the conversation short upon hearing a noise coming from the woods. Intrigued by the sound, both men turn around to figure out where it's coming from in the dark. Following the sound, the pair slowly heads into the darkness. Reaching a clearing, the subordinate is outraged to catch Dianel and Demian engaged in a forbidden duel. However, the captain holds his companion back, telling him to let them fight in peace. Watching the scene, Terran considers how Dianel hit a wall in his training and finds it impressive that he asked a newcomer for help. The commander then mentions he'll just watch the fight for a while, and his subordinate agrees. As he keeps watching their movements, the unit leader notices something intriguing about the duel. To the captain, it's clear that the skill gap between the two fighters is simply too wide. As the duel progresses, Dianel leaps through the air, bringing his heavy sword down on the youth. Dodging with absolute ease, Demian lets the veteran's dangerous attack strike nothing but thin air. Frustrated by the dodge, Dianel is baffled to see another strike fail, unable to comprehend how it's even possible. Standing calmly, the boy watches his rival realize that not a single one of his attacks has even managed to reach him. Faced with his failed strikes, the warrior feels like the youth is predicting his every move perfectly. Seeing his opponent's reaction, Demian remarks that his thoughts are written all over his face, and that he must be wondering why his attacks aren't landing. The boy breaks it down, explaining that while his rival's greatsword packs massive destructive power, its weight makes every strike predictable and simple. Demian then acknowledges the veteran's talent for handling a weapon that basically functions like a heavy chain so well. However, The youth points out that clinging to that blade just because the unit fights monsters will eventually wreck Dianel's body balance. Gripping the shaft of his spear, the boy realizes words won't be enough to convince him, deciding instead to make him feel the truth firsthand. Wreathed in an aura of energy, Demian considers using the mana he expanded earlier with the help of the elixir. With that, the boy surges forward at high speed, lunging straight for his opponent. Noticing his approach, Dianel realizes the energy of the fight has completely shifted. Grit his teeth. The warrior reasons he still holds the advantage in raw attack power. Convincing himself of this, Dianel declares there's no reason to avoid a head-on clash and charges forward. Faced with the charge, Demian tracks his opponent's every move with intense focus. The next second, the crushing impact of the spear against the heavy sword sends sparks flying through the clearing. From the sheer force of the collision, Dianel's weapon is ripped from his grip and sent flying into the night sky. Moment later, the massive blade plunges violently into the ground right beside the veteran. Holding only the broken hilt, Dianel cries out in outrage that it was an extremely expensive sword. Seeing his reaction, the boy calls out to the warrior by his rank, trying to bring his focus back to the fight. Demian then tells his opponent to try attacking him again even in that state, catching the man off guard. Staring at the shattered blade in his hand, the veteran doubts he can pull off anything new with a broken weapon. Even so, Dianel refuses to give up, firmly declaring that the duel isn't over yet. With a swift leap, the warrior lunges forward, wielding the shortened blade against his rival. Effortlessly, Demian steps past the low strike with a simple shift of his spear. Noticing how easily the attack was brushed aside, the opponent's eyes widen, completely unable to make sense of what just happened. Flowing through the motion, Dianel realizes with astonishment that his body feels remarkably lighter and more agile wielding the smaller weapon. Seeing this realization dawn on him, the boy asks if the veteran is finally starting to get his point. Demian then explains that the greatsword was far too oversized and heavy for him, making it much better suited for someone like Kyle. Staring at the blade in his hands, Dianel realizes he spent all this time using the wrong type of gear. Starting to walk away, the boy offers to buy him a new sword as an apology, leaving his companion in disbelief. Confirming the promise with a smile, Demian quietly thinks that winning the warrior's loyalty for that price is a great deal. Looking out at the night over the garrison, the young man agrees that they will go together to pick out the new gear during their free time tomorrow. The next morning, the duo heads to a famous workshop in town to choose the new equipment. As they enter the place, the blacksmith checks the list and calls Dianel by his official combat rank. Enthusiastically showing off a pair of curved blades, Demian explains to his surprised companion that they are scimitars. The boy explains that this weapon is widely used by desert warriors and claims the style will suit him perfectly. Faced with this idea, Dianel gestures that it would be impossible, since he's never used dual swords before. Smiling confidently, Demian shoots back that he knows the perfect technique for this style and promises he will learn quickly. With that promise, the young man states that his partner will become several times stronger than he is now. In a teasing tone, Demian warns that he'll only pay for the purchase if he accepts the scimitars, making Dianel complain about the blackmail. Closing the deal on the spot, the boy quietly reflects that the high cost will be worth it for such an important ally. Then the boy recalls his past life and how he would answer without hesitation if asked who he would trust with his life. Remembering his old comrade's grave, he recalls that Dianel was a loyal friend who ultimately died to save him in the past. Back in the present, Demian pays for the weapons, quietly thinking he would do anything for someone so trustworthy. As he hands the wrapped scimitars to Dianel, the young man decides to help him grow from that moment on, even knowing the path won't be easy. Holding the package in his arms, the veteran feels a sudden chill, not understanding why he feels so uneasy under the boy's gaze. Meanwhile, inside a grand, brightly lit cathedral, the priestess kneels respectfully to greet the high priest. Standing before the religious leader, Claire asks if it's true that the monk unit will also join the subjugation force. In response, the high priest confirms the news and reveals that 20 priests will also be part of the expedition. Hearing about the massive numbers sent by the temple, the young woman is impressed by such an unprecedented mobilization. Determined to take action, Claire asks for permission to join the subjugation force, making her superior consider her suffering on the last mission. Keeping a steady gaze, the priestess reinforces her desire to go, precisely because it's the place she visited recently. Seeing her persistence, the religious leader gives in to the request and agrees to grant her wish. Next, Claire asks if the Neo-Calites unit will participate in the mission, and he confirms that they know that forest better than anyone. Learning this, the young woman quietly considers that the boy will likely be present on the expedition as well. At that moment, she remembers when Demian firmly grabbed her face, telling her to snap out of it during battle. She clearly remembers his command to focus, and unleash all her divine power against the monsters. Stirred by that striking memory, the priestess softly whispers Demian's name while hiding her blushing face. In a vast courtyard surrounded by lush greenery, a massive troop of soldiers stands in perfect formation to begin the expedition. Spotting the entourage approaching, Vassell greets the newcomer, letting him know everyone was already waiting for his arrival. Introducing himself as the commander of the subjugation force, Baron Wilkes Yahello demands to know who is in charge of the local garrison. Upon hearing Vassell introduce himself as the captain of Erkal, the noble scoffs after noticing he has no family name, deducing he is merely a commoner. Looking around with contempt, the Baron complains about this being a god-forsaken place and states he needs to finish the mission quickly so he can leave. Watching the scene from afar, one of the soldiers angrily comments on the man's arrogant attitude, but Demian replies that not all nobles act that way. Curious about his answer, Dianal asks if he speaks as though he knows many nobles, leading the boy to explain that he only heard stories from his late father. Seeing the noble walk away toward the front of the troop, the young man simply mutters his hope that the operation goes off without a hitch. Facing the assembled armies, Yahello takes the lead and declares that everyone there must have already been properly informed about the mission's objective. Shouting loudly, the commander proclaims that the subjugation force received direct orders from the king to eradicate the source of demonic energy consuming the Bronzel forest. Raising his arms before the crowd, the noble bellows an order for all troops to advance immediately into enemy territory. While Kyle shouts along with the others in celebration, Demian sarcastically tells his companion to scream even louder so he doesn't look bad in front of his superior. With the order given, a massive sea of soldiers marches in organized fashion toward the dense woods. Impressed by the sheer size of the army, Dianal comments on the number of soldiers, but Demian warns that numbers alone won't make this easy given the vast size of the forest. Agreeing with the boy's assessment, Vassell admits he has a strong feeling that even this massive crowd might not be enough for the danger awaiting them. As the troop advances, Demian watches the dense foliage, keeping a sharp eye out for any sign of danger. Gradually, the path narrows between the trees, slowing down the march's pace. Cramped by the lack of space, the soldiers complain angrily, telling their comrades to keep moving. Noticing the army's bottleneck, Yahello immediately orders them to change formation into a single column, telling the men on the left to advance first. Observing the maneuver, Demian acknowledges the commander's quick tactical adaptation, but notes that the army's line has become far too long and vulnerable. Approaching respectfully, Vassell excuses himself as he addresses the noble in the lead. Looking back with arrogance, Yahello instantly corrects him, demanding to be called only commander. Accepting the correction, the captain warns that the current formation leaves their flanks exposed and suggests positioning shield bearers in the middle of the group. Dismissing the warning, Yahello decides to send the Erkal guard to take up that position in the center instead. Trying to anticipate other dangers along the way, Vassell also proposes sending a group of fast scouts ahead of the main force. However, with disdain, the noble rejects the request, stating there is absolutely no need for it. Laughing at his subordinate's concern, Yahello reassures him they will slaughter any monster that appears, completely ignoring the captain's warnings. Turning around with a stern gaze, the commander calls the captain directly by name to end the conversation. In a threatening tone, Yahello warns that he will consider any further advice as an abuse of authority and demands he stop immediately. With no way to push back against his superior's order, Vassell simply replies that he understands and quietly retreats. Right at the start of the charge, the soldiers strike down the first creatures that emerge roaring from the brush. Immediately after, another warrior plunges his blade with force into a beast charging forward with a howl. Seeing how easy the battle seems, Yahello marches forward with firm steps, full of total confidence. Shortly after, the commander scoffs, claiming the forest monsters are nothing against an elite army, questioning why they hadn't conquered the area sooner. Meanwhile, in the rear, Demian notices his companion's hesitation and asks what's wrong. The giant replies that he smells a disgusting stench of rotting flesh in the air. Intrigued, Kyle wonders where that odor is coming from and asks the boy to hold on a second. Pointing directly at the ground, the recruit questions if the smell is coming from right beneath them. Seeing his ally's reaction, Demian readies his spear and shifts his full attention to the ground. His eyes widening in shock, the young man instantly recognizes who those tracks belong to. At that exact moment, several massive holes begin to tear open in the forest floor. Realizing the impending danger, Demian screams for everyone to look at the ground, warning them of the threat rising from below. Before the soldiers can react, the earth explodes beneath the troops' feet, blasting everyone into the air. From the ground emerge fierce, short-furred creatures with pig-like snouts, known as morks. As the warriors yell to watch the flanks and demand to know where so many monsters came from, Demian realizes that this entire ambush was planned by the creatures. While running alongside his companion, Demian considers that Morks are usually solitary, peaceful creatures, unable to understand why they are acting as a pack. Amidst the chaos, the boy orders Kyle to help the veterans beside him first, and the recruit agrees without hesitation. At that exact second, one of the beasts appears roaring right behind Demian to launch a surprise attack. With a swift flash of his spear, the young man strikes both monsters at once to stop their charge. Turning to the surrounding soldiers, Demian tells everyone to catch their breath, assuring them the enemies aren't tough if faced head-on. Hearing his advice, the warriors hesitate for a moment as they try to regain their battle stance. Then one of the soldiers bravely leaps at the beast, slicing the monster mid-air. Scanning the field, Demian notices too many creatures corrupted by demonic energy and realizes that won't be enough. Determined to get back up, the boy sprints through the woods at full speed, knowing what they truly need at that moment. Further ahead, Claire and the other priestess remain huddled in terror amidst the surrounding chaos. Suddenly, rapid footsteps approach, startling both women. Appearing before them, Demian orders the priestesses to follow him quickly, and Claire instantly recognizes the young man. Guiding them along the path, the boy asks the priestess to unleash her divine power in that direction, just like she did in the previous battle. Determined to help, Claire promptly replies that she'll do her best to fulfill his request. Clasping her hands in prayer, the young woman begins to channel all her holy power to contain the threat. With that, an overwhelming wave of sacred energy bursts from the priestesses, illuminating the surrounding woods. Feeling the purifying force, the monsters howl in pain, while the soldiers watch the scene in awe. Seizing the opening, the warrior shouts at the top of his lungs for everyone to attack immediately and eliminate the creatures. Following the order, the soldiers charge together, landing lethal blows on the weakened beasts. With the force of the assault, the final creature is destroyed and collapses to the ground. Still panting among the corpses of their enemies, one of the soldiers wonders if they managed to wipe them all out. Regaining his composure, Terran orders them to check for casualties and tend to the wounded right away. Next, the captain urges the troops to make sure every single one of the beasts is truly dead. Hearing heavy footsteps approaching from behind, the leader turns around, intrigued to see who's coming. At that exact moment, Yahello appears and delivers a violent slap right across the man's face. Stunned by the assault, Terran stands frozen and shocked by the sudden blow. Before the scene that terrifies the surrounding soldiers, the nobleman demands to know if he's truly the captain of that unit. Furious, the commander then rants, demanding to know how he's been managing the region and how many creatures he neglected in the forest. Facing the assembled soldiers, Terran tries to argue that predicting the behavior of those corrupted creatures was impossible. Then, the captain points out that Morks weren't the type to act in such an organized way. With a serious look, Terran asks how they could have foreseen the changes caused by demonic energy in monsters that normally didn't act like that. Furious at the excuse, Yahello shouts that they should have scouted ahead and screams that ignorance is no excuse. Pushing back against the accusations, Terran reminds him that the guard captain had warned about needing to scout, emphasizing that the noble himself said killing the beasts was enough. Outraged by the response, Yahello asks if the captain wants to die, until the priestess steps in and tells them to end the argument. Approaching with her staff, Claire explains that the entire forest is poisoned by demonic energy, and that the area has gained a kind of consciousness. When asked what that means, the priestess warns that the forest may have recognized the army as an enemy, warning that strange things will start happening. Ignoring the sacred warning, Yahello snaps that this doesn't excuse the unit's mistakes, making Claire anxious about his attitude. Harshly cutting her off, the commander tells her to stay out of it, threatening to file a formal complaint with the temple if she interferes again. Turning to the soldiers, the noble announces that disciplinary actions will be decided after the expedition, ordering everyone to do their part if they want to stay alive. After that, Yahello orders them to quickly collect the fallen bodies and move locations to set up camp. At nightfall, the army finally sets up a fortified camp deep inside the dense woods. Inside the tent, Demian gets comfortable on his bed, thinking it's a relief there's still a safe place in the forest to camp. Feeling his body heavy as he gets up, the boy realizes it's due to the strong influence of demonic energy spread throughout the region. Looking at the camp, Demian concludes that the source of the demonic energy lies at the center of the forest, since things get worse as they move deeper. Because of this, the young boy considers that the soldiers' condition will worsen as they get closer to the core, and any delay will make the battle even harder. Given these concerns, choosing the right direction becomes crucial while strategy meetings take place in the main tent. Inside the shelter, Yahello gathers the officers around the map to announce the army's planned route. Pointing at the map, the noble explains that the troops will surround the area, circling inward from the outer edges. Questioning the plan, Vassal suggests marching straight for the center, while Terran agrees, warning that a delay will only increase the monster's corruption. Facing pushback, the commander snaps back, asking what would happen if that assumption turned out to be wrong. Leaning over the table, Yahello demands to know if they will take responsibility and risk their own lives if the source isn't actually there. Turning his back, the noble tells the officers to stop interfering when they don't understand the complexities of command. Stepping into the argument, Claire states it is almost certain the energy source is at the center, given the higher concentration found along the path. Right after, Vassell stresses that the expedition has already lost over 100 men on day 1, and delaying the advance will only cost more soldiers. Pressuring his superior, the officer asks him to listen to the priestess and eliminate the central source before dealing with the edges. Crossing his arms, Yahello fires back that his strategy is the safest option to avoid sacrificing men on a forced march. Raising his voice, the commander asks if they are accusing his plan of mistreating the troops, declaring that dying for the kingdom is a noble sacrifice. However, an armored gauntlet raised in front of Yahello suddenly cuts him off. Stepping in, Hemmerin states that the expedition's goal is to destroy the source, arguing that going straight to the center will make the noble a respected commander. He then adds that finishing the job quickly will showcase Yahello's full capability, leaving the noble lost in thought. Convinced by the words, Yahello decides everyone will head straight for the center of the forest to destroy the source of the demonic energy. Faced with this sudden change, Terran and Vassell simply watch the decision in silence. Immediately after, Yahello shouts orders for the troops to form up and march into the deep woods at once. Terran then leaves the tent, walking with firm steps toward the soldiers gathered outside. When a subordinate asks about the meeting, the captain explains they will march straight to the center, as that's the likely origin of the threat. Interrupting the conversation, Demian steps up to ask about the army's formation and where their unit will be positioned. Even though a soldier scolds the young boy for interrupting, Terran steps in, saying there's nothing wrong with asking. The captain then reveals to the men that the Neo-Calit's unit will be leading the vanguard. Hearing this, the boy suggests sending out a scouting team before advancing, making the commander agree that the idea makes sense. Taking the opportunity, Demian places a hand on his chest and volunteers to join the scout team. Outraged by the move, the soldier yells, asking if the kid has lost his mind, telling him to just follow orders since he's just a rookie. Unfazed, Demian argues that he's one of the fastest in the group, with great eyesight and excellent navigation skills in the woods. Silently, Terran observes the boy, thinking he's completely out of the ordinary, and remembering that the young man can even manipulate mana. With that, Terran agrees to let the boy join the reconnaissance team. Surprised by the decision, the soldier calls out to the captain, while Terran notes he is making an exception under one condition. Facing Demian, Terran makes it clear he won't be taking command of the team, announcing he has already chosen who will lead. The captain then calls out loudly for Vex, and the soldier immediately steps forward to receive his orders. When asked by his subordinate, Terran orders Vex to take the rookie, form the team, and set off immediately. Hesitant, Vex points out that the kid doesn't have real combat experience yet, but his superior tells him that's precisely why he'll be in charge. Vex then orders Demian to set his spear aside and equip a short sword for the mission. With preparations complete, the scout team advances silently through the dense woods. Moving through the woods, Demian senses the surrounding energy growing thicker as they push deeper in. Closing his eyes for a moment, the young man tries to track the corrupted creature's aura to locate their primary target. At that exact moment, a dark, terrifying force manifests among the distant trees. Stopping dead in his tracks, the boy prompts the soldier beside him to ask why he halted the march. Pointing toward the dense foliage, Demian warns that he senses a presence ahead, leaving Vex intrigued. Approaching cautiously, Vex peers through the bushes, trying to spot the danger. Determined to investigate, the squad leader orders everyone to follow him and check out the situation. Peeking through the leaves, Vex is completely shocked by the sight before him. Raising his hand to hold back the group, he inwardly admits he planned to scold the rookie if it was a false alarm, but now he's left speechless. Faced with such a terrifying sight, the other scouts gasp, unable to hide their terror. Spread out across the forest before them, a massive horde of various monster species, all corrupted by demonic energy, has gathered. Overcome with panic, a soldier asks Vex if something like this is even possible, questioning why so many beasts are swarming together. Awed, Vex confesses he's never seen anything like it, and wonders how Demian managed to detect such a presence from this far away. Watching the horde's movement, the men notice that all those creatures are marching together in the exact same direction. Analyzing the beast's path, Vex's eyes widen in despair as he realizes where they're heading. In sheer panic, the squad leader shouts a warning that they're heading straight toward the subjugation army's position. Without hesitation, Vex orders 3 scouts to report back to the main unit immediately and alert them to the threat, receiving an instant confirmation. Turning to the young man beside him, Vex calls out to Demian, who promptly answers his superior. Looking intently at the boy, Vex commands him to speak up immediately if he senses any other suspicious presence nearby. Next, Vex explains that their main objective now is to determine the exact number of enemies. Finalizing the plan, the commander decides they will move stealthily behind the horde and checks to make sure everyone understands the orders. Hidden in the brush, the scout team silently watches the massive horde of monsters moving just ahead. Feeling the heavy atmosphere settle around them, Demian wonders what it is. Noticing the pressure in the air is overwhelming. Observing the horde from a distance, the boy figures there's no way these are all the creatures gathered here. Focusing on the area, the young man silently regrets that he would know the true nature of that pressure if his mana were at the 3rd level. Peering through the bushes, Vex whispers in shock that this is absolute madness. Before the scout group, a giant wave of monsters emerges, marching through the forest. Analyzing the enemy army, the leader notes they are far higher level creatures than the previous ones, leading Demian to explain that the rivals' plan was to wear them down before the final attack. Worried about the impending threat, Vex orders an immediate retreat, stating that warning the troops is their absolute priority. At that exact moment, the young man flinches as he notices something strange manifesting in the environment. Without warning, Demian sprints at top speed through the woods, catching his companions completely off guard. Seeing him take off, Vex desperately shouts the boy's name as he dashes into the forest. Gripping his short sword tightly, the young man keeps charging forward through the trees. Catching up to the boy in a fury, Vex demands to know where he's going, while Demian simply asks his superior to look in a certain direction. Extending his arm firmly, the young man points out the exact location where the real danger is coming from. Following the boy's gesture, the scout leader turns his gaze toward the spot. Staring at the boy with wide eyes, Vex reacts, unable to understand what he had just noticed. Facing the ravine consumed by a dark aura, the man asks in awe what that could possibly be in front of them. Meanwhile, the horde of creatures surges furiously against the main army in the middle of the forest. In the thick of battle, Terran wonders in surprise where so many monsters came from. Relieved he prepared the troops thanks to the scout group's report. Defending against the onslaught, a soldier anxiously asks if the search team will be safe, receiving assurances that Vex's presence would keep everything under control. Taking advantage of the purifying light, the priestess yells for everyone to attack the enemies while they're weakened. Empowered by the prayer, the warriors charge furiously, striking down the beast without giving them any room to react. As the direct clash subsides, Terran catches his breath, trying to regain his strength on the battlefield. Suddenly, one of the soldiers screams in desperation, warning the commander about a monster appearing right behind him. Without giving him time to react, the beast raises its axe into the air, ready to deliver a fatal blow. In that same split second, a sharp blade strikes the creature straight in the head, cutting its attack short. Landing nimbly beside the corpse, Demian retrieves his weapon after neutralizing the threat. Running over to his superior, the boy asks if he's okay, leaving Terran stunned by the rookie's sudden arrival. Reaching the spot out of breath, Vex reports to Terran that the team finally located the aberration consumed by demonic energy. Stepping forward into the conversation, Demian intervenes to add that there's a crucial detail in that report. Leaning into his superior's ear, Demian whispers a vital piece of information about the situation in secret. Given what he just heard, Vex immediately demands an emergency meeting with the commanders. As soon as the officers gather, the scout reveals that the team found the aberration consumed by demonic energy. Vex then warns that there's a major problem with that discovery, leaving everyone present intrigued. Introducing the recruit to the group, he explains that Demian was responsible for locating the threat and offers to give the report. Taking the floor, the young man reveals that the aberration in the center of the forest is actually a person-sized crystal. The boy adds that over 100 high-level monsters, like trolls and black bears, are guarding the artifact. Hearing the report, the soldiers express absolute shock at the sheer number of powerful creatures gathered at that point. Realizing the danger, Vex advises an immediate retreat to avoid a slaughter, but Yahello questions whether elite troops should really run from simple monsters. Outraged by the disdain, the scout shouts back that a single black bear takes 10 soldiers just to keep at bay. As Yahello rages over the audacity of his tone, the man counters that it's the commander who fails to grasp the severity of the situation. The scout emphasizes that the contamination empowers the beasts so much that the troops would struggle even against a simple goblin. Losing his patience with the warnings, Yahello draws his sword and orders the man to shut his mouth instantly. Consumed by rage, the noble accuses the soldiers of struggling simply because they're weak. Pressing the blade against Vex's throat, the commander threatens to behead him if he utters another single word. Facing the threat, Yahello turns to Demian and demands to know if what he reported is really true, to which the boy swears on his own life that there is no lie in his words. Hearing the confident confirmation, the noble rests his hand on his chin, pondering the situation thoughtfully. Demian then argues that even if they defeat the monsters, they'll end up wiped out in the process, stating that the best strategy would be to take a different approach. Irritated by the suggestion, Yahello firmly decrees that there will be no retreat and that the subjugation mission must succeed at all costs. Given this unyielding order, the scouts and officers exchange apprehensive glances, realizing there will be no withdrawal. Stepping to the forefront of the discussion, Demian openly declares that there is a way to guarantee the mission's success. Surprised by the recruit's audacity, Yahello asks in confusion what the boy is trying to say by that. Maintaining a firm stance, Demian explains that the army lacks the power to withstand a frontal attack from the beasts, but highlights that it's possible to take the initiative before they advance. When asked how they would carry out such a strike, the young man suggests forming an elite squad to destroy the crystal before the horde arrives. Intrigued by the proposal, Vex asks the boy if he truly believes that's viable, and the young man replies that the strategy is worth a try. Intervening in the conversation, Terran asks if there were other corrupted monsters around the artifact, and Demian promptly confirms their presence. Lost in thought over the danger, Terran considers that a small unit won't have the strength to kill so many beasts, especially with a giant monster that surpasses the power of an ogre. Facing this obstacle, Demian figures they just need to draw the monster's attention without trying to kill them, while a team destroys the central crystal. Reflecting on the idea, Yahello ponders aloud the strategy of luring the creatures away and smashing the artifact to pieces. Turning to the scout leader, the commander asks Vex for his opinion on the young man's plan, making the warrior hesitate before answering. Faced with the commander's question, Vex pauses for a moment as he looks at the completely serene boy beside him. Then, the scout leader openly admits that he considers it quite a reckless operation. However, the warrior adds that if there truly is a way to lead the expedition to victory. Raising his voice with determination, the scout declares he believes Demian's plan is the only possible way. Hearing this stance, Terran simply nods in approval. Next, the leader of the Neo-Calit's unit announces that his group agrees to form the strike squad. Shortly after, Urkal's guard also accepts the proposal, while the temple's envoy explains he won't be able to spare many members to avoid weakening the main army. However, the priest adds that he and Priestess Claire will join the team, highlighting the great sacred power she possesses. Faced with all these agreements, Yahello finally gives in and confirms they will form the assault squad. Then, Yahello shouts out orders to immediately select the 10 best soldiers from each unit to join the team. Setting the troop in motion, Terran calls out to Demian along the way, and the young man promptly responds. Glancing at the recruit, the captain informs him that he will be part of that elite group. With a confident smile on his face, Demian wields his spear and enthusiastically confirms he will carry out the mission. In front of the clearing, the subjugation force troops fall into formation to begin their advance. Noticing the boy in the group, the guards mockingly ask if the Neo-Calit's unit was so short-staffed they had to bring a kid. Surprised by the comments, another warrior steps in, explaining that this young boy was the one who found the corrupted abomination and planned the entire operation. Approaching with a stern look, Vice Commander Burltos scolds the men, asking if they really think they have time for jokes during such a dangerous mission. As the terrified soldiers apologize to their superior, Demian watches the scene, thinking that the Vice Commander seems quite useful and familiar. Soon after, Terran approaches, asking where they should enter the woods, and Demian replies that he knows the way and will lead the group. The young boy then warns that he will take the fastest route to avoid monsters as much as possible, asking everyone to follow him closely on the difficult path. Hearing the instructions, the guards scoff at the warning, doubting they would ever struggle to keep up with a route suggested by a kid. Ignoring their mockery, Demian simply thinks he has no time to waste on foolishness, and takes off at high speed, stating that it's a race against time. Seeing his impressive burst of speed, the soldiers are shocked, asking what's wrong with him and why the kid is running so fast. Urging his subordinates forward, Burltos questions if the men really intend to fall behind the boy they were just mocking a moment ago. Meanwhile, Priestess Claire runs exhausted, trying to keep up the pace, silently lamenting her inability to stay with the troop. Realizing she is about to be left completely behind, Claire is caught off guard when Terran excuses himself as he approaches from behind. With a swift movement, the commander scoops her onto his shoulders, making the young woman let out a startled cry at the sudden action. Carrying the priestess firmly as he runs at full speed, Terran explains they need to move like this to catch up with the others and tells her to hold on tight. Following their leader in a dash, the soldiers charge at high speed through the dense forest. Right after, the boy raises his closed fist and orders the entire troop to halt their advance immediately. Looking down at the bottom of the ravine, the young boy points to the exact location where the corrupted crystal is situated. Before them, the massive crystal structure emanates a dark and terrifying aura. Surprised by the sight, Terran comments on the colossal size of the artifact, while Claire points out the absurd amount of energy stored within it. Observing the structure, the priestess warns that recklessly destroying the object will lead to consequences that will be difficult to contain. Analyzing the perimeter, Demian notes that around 20 giant monsters are guarding the area, and concludes that the situation calls for caution. Turning to the troop, the boy calls for everyone's attention to explain the details of the operation. Gathering his companions around him, the young boy explains that the tactic is to select 5 fighters from each unit to lure the giant beasts away. Pointing to the terrain, Demian details that the goal is to draw those monsters as far away as possible, while the others clear out the smaller creatures. Then, the priest takes responsibility for destroying the artifact, announcing that he will use Claire's holy energy as the signal to attack. Turning to the young boy, Taryn orders his team to quickly eliminate the remaining creatures as soon as the signal is given. Joining her hands in deep prayer, the priestess cries out to the heavens to begin invoking her divine power. In an instant, an overwhelming wave of holy light expands around the young woman, illuminating the entire group. As they pray for mercy to save those present, the purifying glow strikes the corrupted monsters, making the beasts roar in pain. Seizing the signal from the prayer, one of the soldiers shouts for everyone to attack at that very moment. With that, the troop charges forward, unleashing violent attacks against the corrupted creatures. Next, the warriors shout to draw the smaller beasts' attention and prevent them from helping the giant monsters. Facing the enemies, Demian firmly declares that all those creatures will die right there. In a swift motion, the young boy attacks relentlessly, impaling targets with his spear. Continuing his assault, the boy plunges the blade into another monster's back with devastating force. As he catches his breath, Demian considers that he has enough mana accumulated for the fight. The boy adds that his energy is more than enough to handle creatures of that level and charges forward. Looking around, the soldiers anxiously comment that those beasts are tough, and the ones in the back look even worse. At that, one of the warriors warns that the werewolves are 5 times stronger than the orcs and calls for total focus. At that exact moment, the beast lunges in a fury and bites one of the soldiers on the shoulder, making him scream in pain. Overcome with rage, another companion hurls curses at the creature upon seeing the attack. With a devastating claw swipe, the monster tears through the warrior's defense and slams him to the ground. Facing that terrifying threat, Demian states that he will take on that werewolf alone and tells the others to clear the way. Impressed by the claim, Kyle asks in surprise if the young boy is going to fight alone, questioning if Demian can really handle the beast. Observing the beast, Demian silently reflects that he wouldn't be hesitating if he were at the 3rd mana level. Despite that, the boy tells himself he can overcome this challenge by risking his life in combat, just as he always has. Enveloping his weapon in energy, the young boy reflects that he's never had an easy battle anyway. Tracking the monster's rush, Demian instantly predicts that the strike is targeting his left shoulder. Nimbly dodging the attack, he shouts for Dianel to hurry up and move forward. Hearing the call, Dianel confirms he understands the order and dashes toward the objective. At the same instant, the massive creature takes an intimidating stance in front of Demian. Staring into his opponent's glowing red eyes, the boy notices the fierce determination of a beast that refuses to accept defeat. As the monster raises its claw for a heavy blow, the young boy adjusts his stance without taking a single step back. With a lightning-fast counterattack, Demian strikes the monster's neck, declaring he won't spend the entire fight just dodging. Focusing all his mana into the blade, he announces that it's time to end this fight. With an overwhelming slash, the boy cuts through his opponent top to bottom in one precise blow. Under the devastating impact, the monster's massive body splits and collapses lifelessly onto the ground. Panting from extreme exertion, Demian drops to his knees, leaning on his spear. Struggling to pull himself together, the young boy yells out, letting everyone know that now is the exact moment to strike. Answering the call, Hemmerin prepares to deliver the decisive blow against the artifact. With a fast burst of speed, the warrior leaps high into the air toward the center of the valley. Focusing his strength into his arm, Hemmerin raises his energized fist for the attack. Plunging down violently from above, the man descends with a roar aimed straight at the great pillar. The impact of the punch hits the target dead on, triggering a radiant explosion across the area. Under the force of the strike, deep cracks begin to spread across the surface of the crystal. Seeing the structure give way, the soldiers celebrate in relief, shouting that victory is finally theirs. But in that very second, the warrior steps back in shock as a dark aura begins to seep from the fissures. Struck by the dark force, Hemmerin roars in pain as he is thrown far back, while Claire screams his name. Witnessing the scene, the guard asks in shock what that violent force could possibly be. Right after, the dark energy expands into giant branches, covering the entire forest sky. Watching the phenomenon, Demian warns that the crystal's demonic energy has completely collapsed. As the artifact explodes, tendrils of dark energy spread across the sky while the warriors watch in complete shock. Realizing the imminent threat, Demian states that he must stop that power from advancing before everyone is put in danger. Right after, the young man points his energy-imbued spear straight at the base of the corrupted crystal. Sprinting across the field at breakneck speed, he declares that he is the only one who can destroy the structure right now. Channeling all his strength into the charge, Demian says it is up to him to deliver the final blow. Eyes locked on his target, the boy promises to end the fight once and for all with a single strike. In the very next instant, Demian drives the tip of his spear violently into the heart of the artifact. Feeling the core's resistance, he notices dark energy creeping up his arm during the impact. Grit his teeth against the exertion, Demian acknowledges he doesn't have enough strength to shatter the barrier yet, but he refuses to give up. Forcing his entire body downward, the boy declares that he will never stop here in the middle of battle. With that extra push, the weapon's tip finally pierces the surface, sending deep cracks spreading across the structure. Ramping up the pressure, Demian drives the blade even deeper to shatter the crystal's barrier into pieces. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, a massive creature turns toward one of the warriors amidst the chaos. Facing the approaching corrupted monster, the soldier takes his stance as the beast lets out a roar. At that exact moment, the artifact's structure crumbles under the pressure of Demian's attack, completely collapsing to the ground. Through the settling dust, the warriors watch the scene, cheering in relief to be alive while wondering if it's truly over. As the crystal shatters, Demian holds his ground, absorbing and containing all the dark energy emanating from the artifact. Witnessing this shocking sight, the soldiers scream Demian's name in utter terror. Immediately after, a wave of dark energy swirls around the boy in a whirlwind as a desperate scream echoes through the area. With the evil artifact destroyed, the subjugation expedition officially comes to a successful close, and the troops return to the garrison. As the dust clears, nothing remains but the traces of the massive demonic energy crystal, completely shattered on the ground. Back in the city, the survivors gather silently at the cemetery to pay tribute to their comrades who fell in battle. Shortly after, the soldiers celebrate the mission's success, raising their mugs in a lively toast at the tavern. Raising his glass before the feast, Yahello congratulates everyone for their efforts and expresses gratitude for their performance in the difficult mission. The noble then announces that the families of the fallen will receive financial compensation, instructing each unit to identify their casualties. Approaching the injured warrior, Yahello asks if he is recovering well and listens, as the soldier replies that divine power helped him overcome his wounds. Changing the subject, the commander clears his throat softly to get the attention of everyone in the room. Bowing in a gesture of respect, Yahello apologizes for underestimating them before and admits that victory was only possible thanks to them. Hearing the apology, Taryn and the other officer calmly reply that it's all right and there's no need for that. Finally, Yahello smiles with satisfaction, announcing that both units will receive special rewards for their deeds in the expedition. While the celebration continues, a mysterious figure speaks intently with one of the warriors at the table. Curious about the reports, the man in the red coat asks if the threat was truly a crystal imbued with demonic energy, and the fighter confirms it. Adjusting his mustache, the man asks who was responsible for destroying such a structure. To the question, the soldier simply nods, confirming the truth of the feat. The warrior then reveals that it was accomplished by Demian, a member of the Neocalit's unit. Surprised by the news, the stranger finds it odd that a simple, inexperienced soldier was capable of pulling off such a feat. Looking around, the man asks for more details about what happened and inquires where the boy is at that moment. Closing his eyes with hesitation, the warrior begins to reveal the young man's current whereabouts. A heavy silence falls over the table as Demian's situation is discussed. Meanwhile, the boy remains unconscious, floating in the middle of a vast darkness engulfed in mana. Bit by bit, the young man opens his eyes, completely lost as to what is happening. Bringing a hand to his head, Demian remembers seeing the crystal shatter and realizes he can't feel anything around him. Touching his own chest, he concludes he isn't dead, knowing that feeling all too well from his past life. Trying to compose himself in the dark, he decides his first step must be figuring out where he is. But a second later, Demian lets out a groan of pain as a sudden reaction takes over his body. Startled by the sinister feeling, Demian realizes something unknown is invading his body. Pressing his hand against the affected area, the young man curses as he realizes it is pure demonic energy. His eyes widen in shock, fearing the absolute worst at this terrible realization. Faced with this, Demian wonders if the destroyed crystal is trying to turn him into its new host, seeking to control him just like it did with the beasts. Gripping his clothes tightly, the young man remembers how hard he fought for this new life and swears he will never let himself be controlled. Doubling over in pain, he resists bravely as the dark force continues to press down on him. Watching the dark swirl on his chest, Demian curses, unable to understand the true purpose of that energy. At that moment, the dark vortex begins to spin with overwhelming intensity at the center of his being. Watching closely, the boy realizes to his surprise that his mana circuit is expanding in response to the flow. Grit his teeth with determination, Demian realizes that despite not understanding the situation, this is the perfect opportunity to evolve. Vowing to endure the suffering, the boy plans to expel all the dark force as soon as the expansion of his core is complete. Curling up in the dim light, the young man resists the painful process consuming him with all his strength. With sweat pouring down his face, Demian tells himself he just needs to hold on a little longer. Then, a bright light expands through the space, blasting all the dark contamination far away from him. Panting after the extreme effort, Demian celebrates his victory as he realizes his mana circuit has finally reached the 3rd level. Despite the intense pain, the young man mutters to himself that he must endure this trial no matter the cost. Amidst the darkness, a voice emerges from the background, encouraging him not to give up in the face of suffering. Hearing this, Demian recognizes that his willpower has always been his greatest strength, the very thing that kept him going in his past life. With renewed determination, the boy reaffirms to himself that he will never yield. Focusing all his energy, he screams, demanding the evil force leave his body immediately. Moments later, the young man wakes up lying on a bed in the barracks, surrounded by dark soot. As he comes to his senses, Demian groans, noticing dark marks spread across his skin. Sitting up in bed, the boy looks at his own arms and notices with surprise that his body has undergone a drastic change. At that moment, his comrades pull back the curtain in surprise, exclaiming when they see he has finally woken up. Relieved by the reunion, the recruit reveals how worried they were after he collapsed, and mentions that Commander Yahello is waiting for him. Intrigued by the news, Demian asks why he is being summoned, and his squad mate suggests it might be to reward him for destroying the crystal. Before letting him leave, the soldier pauses and points out that the boy needs to take care of something before the meeting. The colleague then advises the young man to wash up first, while Kyle mocks him, asking if he got dirty sleeping, only for Demian to immediately deny it.